Today, this is a celebration for the upcoming launch of AA3 on Audible. That comes out tomorrow. We are not going to have any spoilers for AA3 in the chat today, so please do not ask any spoiler questions that based on things that are already in AA3. I know a lot of people have not read it yet, so let's keep the questions more general or focused on things that are completely unreleased content like soul brand questions or things like that. So that's my general intro. Kester, you got anything you want to say?
Just for the way that this Q&A will work, we're using the new stage system for Discord. So anybody who has a working microphone, if they wish, they can push a button at the bottom of their screens to request to speak, and they'll get added to a channel. And we will try to fit in between the questions I'm pulling from the live stream chat. We can pull them onto stage, and they can interact with Andrew and ask a question live. And when you do that, please introduce yourself with your Discord nickname that you have, so that we can attribute the question to you when Zig makes his transcript of this. And that'll cut down on me mispronouncing horribly your nicknames. So,
fantastic. I hope that this ends up working out. I've never tried this feature before, so exciting stuff. Looks like we already have one request to speak, so two. I'm going to just grab the first person and we'll see what they have to say.
All right.
All right, so I'm Laura. The question is, how many trans characters have we seen in the books yet? Not necessarily names, but just how many, the number.
I'm not necessarily comfortable giving a number because I haven't outed all of our trans characters yet, and I want there to be some surprises with that, but I will say that there are at least 3 out trans characters that have been identified, or trans or non-binary. I'm using that in a more general sense. There are 2 trans characters in the War of Broken Mirrors that have been more or less identified as being trans during the War of Broken Mirrors, and then there's 1 high-profile non-binary character in Arcane Ascension. There will be more characters like that in the future, but I don't want to give specific numbers without revealing in story who I'm talking about. Good question.
All right. First question up from the chat is, what is the most hospitable dominion to human life? Oh, I'm sorry, I've already messed up my job. From the accident, what is the most hospitable dominion to human life?
That's a great question, because some of the obvious ones like life would actually kill you. So I would say the most hospitable one is probably protection. Protection, it's not going to cause any immediate negative effects just by being there. And it honestly might make you healthier just hanging out in the Dominion of Protection. So yeah, protection's probably top of the list. You could argue transcendence. You could argue transcendence, but there are huge risk factors in being transcendence. So yeah. Next question.
Right. Do you want to pull someone from the audience?
Yeah, we have another person to bring up. So hi.
Hello, it's Neonpur, or Arson H. Wellington currently. Pleasure
to meet you.
So my question would be, so of course with any book, you'll write a preliminary script and then go through edits. Are there any major changes you've had to make during the edits?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking. I've actually been meaning to talk about this for a while. So to give you an example of this, in Sufficiently Advanced Magic, the scene actually used to open with Corin's train ride all the way to the spire. And so it was a much more introspective origin where he's sitting by himself on the train and looking at all of the people who are sitting in other parts of the train with their parents or with their siblings or things like that. And he's sitting by himself because nobody went with him on the train ride. And he's thinking about Tristan and thinking about his father. And so in taking that scene out, we lost a little bit of context for Corin's sort of starting conditions and his relationship with his family and things like that, which are not introduced until he sees his father and Sarah later in the book. The reason I made that change is because it was a long scene that took a lot of time to get to the action that happens when you first step into the tower. And so people thought it was boring, basically. It was not a fun intro in the way that Corrin's just stepping straight into the tower is. But it was an interesting change in that I do think that we lost some important context there, and that that original scene also introduced things like what attunement he was trying to get, which was Shaper, and his thought processes about that. And I do think that to some degree, I wish that we'd kept some elements of that in there, because when Corrin does get his attunement, you don't really have any context on what he missed out on in the current version of the story. And so if I ever go back and do like an anniversary edition or something like that, maybe I'll jam some of that stuff back into the story so that you have a better idea of what Corrin's goals were for getting an attunement, as well as his relationship with his family and that sort of thing. Great question.
All right.
I'm already chugging
From
water bottles.
Techmaster. Sorry, what's that?
Oh, I just said I'm already chugging water bottles.
From Techmaster. How often do you get writer's block, and how do you work past it?
Oh, yeah. Fantastic question. So I get writer's block all the time. And my primary means of getting through it is working on something else. It's one of the main reasons why you see me switching between books rather than working on just Arcane Ascension or that sort of thing. Arcane Ascension itself started out as a side project because I needed a pause from working on the War of Broken Mirrors. And so if I didn't take breaks and try other things, there would be no Arcane Ascension. So yeah, switching it up and working on another project is my primary means of getting through writer's block.
All right. Anybody from the audience waiting?
Yeah. Let me pull up one of these people. I like the username. So hi.
I'm Talian Delirious. Are you okay with silly questions?
Yeah, by all means, ask a silly question.
Are the Weapons and Wielders books an isekai?
Oh, that's a great question. I would not qualify them as an isekai. So Talian Solarius does move from place to place in between the War of Broken Mirrors and Weapons and Wielders. So in that respect, if he was moving to another world, I would call that an isekai. But this is continent-to-continent transportation, and in spite of the fact that the continent functions very differently, I would say it doesn't quite qualify as being an isekai. That being said, we may see people traveling to other worlds in the future, and we do have some characters in the Weapons and Wielders series that you could qualify as being isekai characters. In a technical sense. Sorry, I should probably give people who are not familiar with these subgenres some context here. So the term isekai is a Japanese term that means another world. And it is generally used to refer to what we would call in the Western market portal fantasy books, like Alice in Wonderland or Narnia or that sort of thing. Those are sort of the forerunners for the isekai genre. In modern Japanese animation, you see a lot of isekai stuff. And some of that is people who are physically transported to other worlds. A lot of it is reincarnation stuff. And so you can see some similarities between that and Karis moving from continent to continent. But a better match would be somebody like, say, Ishiel Dawnsglow, who actually is literally from another planet. Minor spoilers for people who haven't read Weapons and Wielders yet. But yeah, you've got a couple characters like Ishiel. From his perspective, it is closer to being an isekai. Good question.
All right. From the accident, are dogs harvesters of the Dominion of Joy?
Aw, that's adorable. If there was a Dominion of Joy, then I would say yes, but there isn't. So the answer is unfortunately no. And I will bring up somebody else from the audience to speak now. Man, saying there is no Dominion of Joy is kind of dark, isn't it? I sent an invite to someone. Here we are. Welcome.
Hey, this is Blizzupblot, longtime fan. My question is about in Arcane Ascension. The main character starts out as he's wanting to prove his father wrong, but is it really that his prime motivation, or is it really just his love of learning the core principles of magic and basically trying to figure out what people have just written off as impossible?
Sure, yeah, that's great. I think that Corrin has more than one motivation. I mean, saving his brother is part of it. Proving his father wrong is part of it. I would say his core motivation really is proving that he has worth, that he was raised under conditions where he could never be good enough. And he is trying to prove both to himself and to others that regardless of what his father says or what society says, he has worth as a person. That being said, I would say that figuring out how magic works and what makes the magic system tick, that's what's fun for him. So in a long-term sense, that absolutely drives his motivation. But before he gets into doing something like that full time, he's going to have to figure out that that's actually what he wants. So it's a really good question. I would say that that is a critical part of who Corin is as a person, but he hasn't really figured that out for himself yet.
Sweet.
All right, good question. Let's get the next one.
Also from Blows Up a Lot, how many dominions are there?
Ooh, without too many spoilers, there are 12 prime dominions and there are 48 deep dominions. So that is 60 in the standard set. There are also weird things that you may or may not call dominions depending on your classification. So things like everybody knows that Karis has some sort of bizarro annihilation aura thing. That is a non-standard dominion or a non-standard magic type. Whether or not it actually qualifies as being a dominion at all depends on your definitions of the term. So sort of standard dominions, but there are more types of magic than the number of dominions. And next, I will bring up somebody from the audience. This is kind of a fun structure. I like going back and forth like this. Hi.
Hello. In the third War Broken Mirrors book, we see sort of a hostile body takeover with the Vec, I believe they were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it possible to voluntarily switch bodies with someone?
Ooh, that's a fun question. There are conditions under which body swapping can occur voluntarily. You may or may not see something like that in one of the upcoming books. So yeah, very good question.
Thank you for taking the time to answer.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, next up. From Techmaster, what dominion would you like to have the most and why?
Come on, I'm going to have to answer one of the nonsense overpowered dominions. So nonsense overpowered non-standard dominions aside, I would say that from a... Okay, I'm going to take a step back. This depends on whether this is Andrew Rowe on Earth answering the question, or if it is Andrew Rowe on, the continent of Mithralis answering, or the Andrew Rowe on the continent of Kaldwin answering, that sort of thing. I would say that from a utility standpoint, assuming that I work like, say, a Dominion sorcerer, and that I can get better at using this over time, I would say I would take one of the very broad ones, like Dream or Spirit, because they can mimic virtually any other type of magic. Not as effectively as those things, the other types of magic do. But basically, I would take one of the blue magey kind of things where I could get access to doing general stuff like healing or transportation or things like that, all through a single dominion. What about you, Kester?
Wow. That is also where I was going. Dream is definitely a big one because of the ability to emulate the other types of spells. But I always have a soft spot in my heart for chaos. So
of course you will. Maybe someday we'll actually see one of your chaos casters come into the story.
That would be a treat.
All right, let me... am I pulling somebody up next? I think that's what I'm doing.
Yes.
All right. Hi, welcome.
I go by non-specific on the Discord, and I was just wondering, we've seen Vekes lethally drain an elemental. Could they do that to a human?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm just going to say yes. Yes, you could. Yes, that could technically happen.
All right.
Yeah, good question.
Next up is Sterling asks,
ironic.
Is Soulbrand, the sword, really that long? Or is it all an illusion and Soulbrand is really a knife?
Soulbrand, that's a funny question considering some things that happen in the future that I'm not going to spoil, except, by implying that. But no, the Soulbrand really is that large. Soulbrand is the great sword of the bunch, and there there are different weapon types for every individual one of the sacred. All right, I'm going to bring somebody else up. Hi.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good. So having read the books, it seems like the Game of Crowns exists in both regions.
Yeah.
Did any of the Crowns pieces from because in the Game of Crowns you have your like specific army, like you have your magic deck. Did any of the like armies from Mithralis make it over to Caldwin?
Yeah, House Hardigan and House Theus have their own like unit sets, and those would have migrated.
Nice, awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great question. And for people to know, I actually have the whole Crowns rules set written. It's playable, but I'm looking for somebody to publish it as an actual board game as opposed to just dropping a rules set out there. And then there's also some like weirdness with intellectual property for who owns what with publishers and such. So that might take some time to resolve, but there is a written Crowns rule set, and hopefully I'll be able to get that to you guys eventually.
Okay, next up is from Laura. What do you think of the affectionate nickname Swolebrand fans have given the upcoming book?
I think Swolebrand is great. Swolebrand is a very swole weapon, depending on your interpretation. Certainly, a great sword is pretty swole. So yeah, I think Swolebrand is a great nickname. All right, I'm going to pull somebody else up for a question. Hi, welcome.
Hey, thanks for taking the time.
You're welcome.
This is Apex Complex from the Discord. Huge fan of all three series, and so also wanted to say that I'm a huge fan of the way that you advocate so frequently for progressive fiction on Reddit and social media. It's great to see.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we really appreciate it. My question was, you mentioned in your blog recently that Arcane Ascension was designed to kind of be a side story, and I think everyone's under the same impression. Mm-hmm. And Karis is kind of, the center of the universe, and that's the way that it was designed to be. I was just curious, do you find that you feel any resentment toward Corrin and the other Arcane Ascension characters and the setting in general, just because of the wide demographic toward like the popularity for the series, or is it more just like two separate entities now to you?
Oh, that's a really good question and a really interesting one. And I'm sure some authors probably would feel about that, but I don't. I have to juggle the fact that Arcane Ascension is the most popular series with making sure that the plot line of my other stuff still continues. And the readjustments there basically mean that I have to keep to a schedule for still putting out some content for each side of things. Arcane Ascension was always planned to be a long-term story. I planned for it to be 6 to 7 books from the beginning. So it's not like it was a side story that was only going to be 1 book or 2 books long or anything along those lines. I don't have any resentment for Corrin. He's probably one of my absolute favorite characters. I think I've probably told people in the past that I think Jonan Kestrine is probably my actual favorite character. But don't tell any of my other characters that. Certainly don't tell Dawn that. But no, I'm not resentful that Arcane Ascension is my most popular series. It excites me that people are interested in it, and I honestly think that Arcane Ascension represents a development on my skills as a writer from working on the War of Broken Mirrors, and it makes sense that people are more interested in it. That being said, I just want to make sure that people don't have the expectation that Corrin is going to be the classic epic fantasy hero that is going out and saving the world all the time. Arcane Ascension was always written to be more of a personal journey. And the story of Arcane Ascension is focusing on who Corrin is as a person and what Corrin wants to do with his life. It is less about your classic, going and fighting the Dark Lord, and more about Corrin just finding himself and figuring out how he wants to live his life. And so I'm not going to say that I have any resentment or anything like that, but I do have to caution my readers about their expectations. I do plan to incorporate Corin and some of the other characters from Arcane Ascension into other things, both because that is naturally how things are evolving as a story, and to some extent because of their popularity. I know people want more content, so I'm going to write things that I was not originally planning to write. But that would be true for anything. I always come up with more ideas to write as I'm working. So, for example, I will probably be doing some Sarah Shard stuff at some point, or Sarah Cadence now, sorry. Eventually, I will be doing some things with other characters from that series. I'm trying to make sure that I don't spoil things too much because I don't remember exactly how much I've said about stories from other characters' perspectives. But yeah, Arcane Ascension, I plan to expand on it further, but I don't want people to have the misconception that Corin's narrative is sort of the general focus of the universe as a whole. For the record, Karis isn't necessarily either. He is the main viewpoint character for this time period in the story, or these time periods, I should say, since there's stuff with that. But there will be other time periods in this universe that focus on other characters, like Rin, for example. I've mentioned that Rin Jaden is probably going to get some books. Those will take place before Karis is born. There will also be other characters that are later in the timeline that I'm not going to say are necessarily second-gen characters, but something along those lines, where you'll see people who are, maybe Karis will still be around, but he will not be the focal point at that point in time. So, long-winded answer, but it was an excellent question, and I think it's worth talking about. So thank you for asking.
Oh, thank you. That was perfect. That was very insightful.
Glad it came across as insightful. I try to be insightful. I don't know if I ever succeed, but I try. Thanks.
All right, next up from Glaurung, do void elementals actually exist?
Yes, they do. Excellent question. I'm going to get water, and then after I have some water, I think you can hear my lovely drinking sounds.
I'll try to talk over them. This is the worst part of the Q&A, when Andrew has to wander off to do something, and then I'm suddenly under pressure to be entertaining.
We can bring Dyson on to chat with you if I have any gaps.
I don't know if he's available.
I think he's here. I think
Should he?
I've seen a few.
He might be listening in, but I think he's at work.
Oh, yeah, you're right. He actually almost certainly is at work right now. Thank you for listening while at work, Dyson. All right, I'm going to bring up the next person from the audience.
Howdy. Thank you for the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm a long-term JRPG fan and idle clicker and progressive, video game fan in general.
Fantastic.
Your world absolutely fits so many different game genres, like an ARPG, like Diablo, Grim Dawn, Chronicon, or even an idle clicker.
Sure, absolutely.
When are you going to make that? I mean, just built the universe. We can see, the like Diablo-style gems, but, instead of powers. I want a game. When is it going to happen?
I would love to. So fantastic question. Obviously, I would love to see video games. So as many of you know, I to some degree still am, a professional game designer. I do not have the ability to go Toby Fox and make a full-on video game by myself, however. And that means that I would have to go to a development studio in order to get them to do it. There have been indie studios that have already offered, but with my experience working in the gaming industry, I know that working with small indie publishers, it can have pluses and minuses. And I really want to find a company that I think would do my games justice. So essentially, that means that I have to go to big companies or medium-sized companies that I think could handle the story side of it. That's the most important thing to me, making sure that the story makes sense. Obviously, I could do something that's story light, like an idle clicker or something like that, but that's not necessarily how I would want to represent this in game form. I would love to see something that is more like your Witcher 3 or that sort of thing. So story-heavy, action RPG, something along those lines. There are other genres that I think would work well too, but probably something that is more action RPG-ish. Or just straight RPG. I wouldn't mind seeing something that is along the lines of a Pillars of Eternity or something like a Dragon Age. Any of that would be fantastic. But the way that the video game industry works in general is that most companies want to own the IPs, which is intellectual property, for whatever games that they're doing. I am not going to be giving my book intellectual property over to a big company like, say, Blizzard or something. So that puts me in a strange place where the small companies that are willing to do it, I don't necessarily think would have the resources necessary to do a game style that I want, but the large companies that are capable of doing a game on the scale that I'm interested in probably do not want to do something that is not with intellectual property that they own. There are a few specific medium-sized companies that do a good job with working with existing intellectual property. One of them, for example, is Obsidian, one of the places I used to work. I have talked to Obsidian about this, but they are way too busy, and they were also purchased by Microsoft. Since they were purchased by Microsoft, it is much, much less likely that I will be able to work with them, because I think that Microsoft, and I'm purely speculating here, I haven't talked to Obsidian about it since this point, but I suspect that Microsoft would want to own the intellectual property for anything that's being made. So that's the trickiness there. There are other companies like CD Projekt Red or Cryptic that also do really good licensed work, but they're few and far between. The best bet that I have of getting a company like CD Projekt Red or Obsidian or somebody like that to make a game is to get more successful. I am at the point of, I have a lot of book sales by the standards of self-published novelists. I am not at the stage of someone like, say, Brandon Sanderson. Very few people are. But you have to kind of get to somebody like Sanderson's level or close to it before a company on the scale of Obsidian or that sort of thing wants to work with you as a game designer without owning the IP. So basically, the short answer is yes, I absolutely would love to have some sort of game, but it will probably have to wait until the books get a little bit further along. But who knows? Maybe a company like CD Projekt Red or Obsidian will approach me at some point. Who knows? Thanks for the question.
Cool, thank you. And anything us fans can do to help, let us know. There's an army of us.
Leave reviews. That is honestly the best thing that individual fans can do. And also spread the word. But we've got the Audible version of if you listen to that and you have the ability to do so, please leave a review. And that type of thing helps attract other people. And then the books will be more successful. So there you go. That's how you can help. Thank you.
All right. Dyson, I see that you're pinging me. I can't see those pings because I don't want to lose my place in the questions. So I'm just going to pretend that you were complimenting me. And thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We have a question from Cryptid. What kind of food did you have before this?
I had chicken fettuccine Alfredo.
And because that was a gimme, I'm just going to move on to, from Primal Sigma, could a human act on behalf of a dominion in the same capacity as a harvester or gatherer?
Sort of. That's a really interesting question. There are definitely people who try, and we will probably get into some characters that are closer to that. Maybe when I do something that follows after War of Broken Mirrors 3. I don't know how soon, but human interactions with dominions, we'll see more of that eventually. Really good question, but gets into some complicated things. All right, I'm going to bring somebody up from the audience. Hi, welcome. Looks like you are currently muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, my apologies. Thank you for picking me. I was just curious about the whole timeline. Between the, because you mentioned how these times interact, like the different time eras you've mentioned, and I was curious how these times are interacting with your process, how it affects you with these different timelines.
Oh yeah, great question. So I enjoy jumping around in the timeline and writing things at different in history. And I can do that largely because I used to write stuff through tabletop games and live-action role-playing games, and I have a lot of content to draw from that is either from backstory from those games or from actual content that ran in some tabletop somewhere at some point in time. Most of the stuff that is running right now, or most of the stuff that I am writing in books at this point in time, is hundreds of years before any of the stuff that I ran for my original tabletops and live-action role-playing games. It is basically like, oh yeah, this is this character's tragic backstory, or that sort of thing. So I am filling out the timeline with things that are already known to me because I've got some document buried somewhere with some character's background, or because poor people like Dyson and Kester had to play in one of my tabletops at some point, and so I already had figured some of this stuff out for that tabletop at some point in time. So that gives me kind of a unusual style of writing these things that I would not recommend to any other aspiring author, but because this is a game setting, I have the ability to pop around like this and draw from a lot of existing content.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
All right. Next up, from the Cooler Leo, does anything actually exist in the Dominion of Void?
Yes. Took me a minute to think on that, but no, yeah, the answer is yes. Good question. I'm going to bring somebody else up. Hi, welcome.
Hello. So I'm Calvin95376 on your Discord. I wanted to ask you, so for your writing process, names, where do you kind of get names? Is it just something you play around with? Is it like, oh, I have a name right off the top of my head, I know who that person's going to be?
Great question. So it depends on the individual character. For some of them, like Jonan Castrian or Talion or people like that, they're character names that I came up with when I was working on making player characters for tabletops, for LARPs, for things like that many years ago. For other characters, they're referential to other works. Lydia, for example, Lydia is named after Rydia from Final Fantasy IV. So you've got some referential names like that. And then you also have characters that have been given names from other languages. You've got some Japanese names, for example. Most of those are meaningful names. So when you see somebody named Muramasa and you're familiar with the historical or legendary Muramasa figure, you'll know that I'm drawing from that when you see a character named Muramasa. Same thing with characters like Seiryu or things like that. Although I always give them a little bit of a spin so that it's not quite what the real world versions of these characters are supposed to be like. Yeah, and then for more esoteric names, say more generic fantasy names that do not sound like real person names, a lot of it is just coming up with names that I think sound interesting. And in other cases, they're derived from characters that other characters that I've already written. I do a lot of connections between later character names and characters that existed in the past of the setting, both for individual people and for regions. So, for example, cities like Velthrin and Valeria are both named after the deity Velrin. You'll find a lot of names for locales that are named after deities from previous time periods or things like that. So yeah, that's sort of my process. Depends on the individual character, but several processes there. Good question.
All right. From Sterling, would Ayara affectionately refer to Valian as Veve?
When in a particular do that, probably not to his face though. That
you
would
you cut out pretty bad right there.
Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna say when in the right frame of mind, probably, but not to his face. Did that
Corollary from me. Does Ayara have a frame of mind that could be considered right?
Oh, that's a great philosophical question. Probably no. I feel like that's a question I should be asking one of the AR.
I was about to say I can ask one of the ARs later.
Yeah, I know one of them was in here earlier, but sure if she's still here. But yeah, we can ask the ARs there at some point. All right, I'm going to bring up somebody else from the audience. Hello.
Hello. Let's see. What was my question? Oh, yeah. So, you mentioned how you've had a whole lot of things that you sort of draw inspiration from, most of them being, fairly old. Since you've started the series, have there been any more recent inspirations that you've drawn a bit from?
Oh, that's a great question. Thunderbolt Fantasy. Absolutely. Thunderbolt Fantasy is my absolute favorite thing to watch right now, and I would say that Shofukan or Shangbuhan, depending on how you're translating that name, is probably one of the closest characters I've seen in fiction to a bitter and jaded alternate universe version of Karis. So if you kind of want to see a bitter and jaded alternate universe Karis, I would recommend going and watching Thunderbolt Fantasy. Especially Bewitching Melody of the West. That movie is phenomenal. So there's my plug for Thunderbolt. Beyond that, I'm always playing new JRPGs along those lines. And so I draw some inspiration from that. And I am still both running and participating in some tabletops as well. Both Dyson and Kester are running games that I'm participating in. And they are both playing in games that I am running. So I draw stuff from those games as well. And so there's still ongoing content that I am running in this universe and playing in this universe and other universes that I draw inspiration from. So yeah.
Alrighty.
Great question. Go watch Thunderbolt Fantasy.
That's the one with the puppets, right?
It is, in fact, the one with the puppets. It is really strange, but I absolutely love it.
Oh my.
All right. Laura would like to check to see if you have water.
Yeah. I am gradually. At some point, I will go grab more, but yes, I will drink a little bit more right now. And you can ask another question.
All right, we got one here. It seems it got missed, but I'm throwing it in. If Karis were a class from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, which would he be? Same question for Corrin, if you're so inclined.
So he wouldn't be any 5th edition class because they don't represent him properly. I mean, if I'm being pushed, then I'm going to have to say he's an Eldritch fighter, but the 5th ed classes are garbage at representing Karis. So there's my complaint about 5th ed. 5th ed needs to get a Duskblade or a Sword Mage or a Magus. Those are the right classes to represent Karis properly. Sword Mage, Sword Sage, those types are probably the best. So 4th ed Sword Mage, 3.5 Sword Sage, or Pathfinder, the Magus class, probably Blackblade / Kensai Magus. And then earlier 3.5 Duskblade, but I would say go with the Book of Nine Swords classes instead. Sword Sage is a much better representation for Karis. Corrin's a wizard. It's a boring answer, but yeah, Corrin's. I don't think that there's. I have not seen a satisfactory artificer yet. There might be one, but I have not looked into it too much yet. But yeah, Corrin's pretty much wizard. Okay, I'm gonna bring up somebody else, and then after that, I will probably take a very brief and go get some more water. All right. Next question. Go ahead.
Hi, this is the accident. With some elementals being intelligent, are there societies within different dominions?
Fantastic question. Yes, there absolutely are. So elementals is a very broad category that humans use to classify things. And there's all sorts of things that humans would call elementals. Some of them are humanoid, some of them are not, and a bunch of them do have societies. And we may see some of those eventually. So yeah, totally. Great question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to take like a 2-minute break. So I'm going to mute myself, get some water, and I will be right back. You guys can chat with each other.
All right. Dyson, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good. Just at work, listening to this. Rue told me, and I was like, I'm on my way because this is way more entertaining than work.
Fair enough.
I don't really know what to talk about. Like, we talk about so many of our LARP adventures, and it's like,
what about that game that Andrew was mentioning that you're running? When are we going to get back to that?
I would really love to get back to that game. It really depends. Like, with everyone, it's just a matter of setting a date with everybody. That's part of the problem. Everyone's like busy with other tabletops, but like I saw all my notes like from everything. So like in theory, you guys won't have forgotten too much. I feel bad leaving you guys off at like an intrigue plot point where you guys were like picking up clues and stuff like that. So I'm sorry.
Yeah,
for that,
the exact middle of a murder investigation is a horrible time to have a like 7-month hiatus.
I would like to point out that it's not my fault, though. This is not my fault. Also, like, we have the tabletop, like, that Rue's running for us and, like, stuff like that. I think that's taking up a large chunk of our weekends.
That is true.
And then I have a Starfinder tabletop. Gotta hit that niche that we need. It's like drugs for us. We love this world, and that's part of our problem.
That is true. Too many characters to play, not enough games being run.
That's true. Not enough games I want to play in anymore is part of my problem. Like, I'm so picky anymore because I'm like, I like making magic spells. Making magic spells make brain juice go burr. Is basically how I feel. And Tabitha,
that is true.
You'll solve the whole thing for sure.
That is true. I do enjoy smashing dominions together to see what happens.
Like, so excited for. Yeah, I can't say anything.
I know.
Like, that's like I have to just keep my mouth shut a lot of times, which is why I don't really talk about the LARP or everything, because I'm worried I'm going to say something I shouldn't.
That's fair. I mean, it is a delicate dance that I put on.
You're really good at it, though. You're really good at it. I am not as tight-lipped as Justin is, so I just don't say anything unless I'm fairly certain Justin has already said it. Or Kester. Okay, but yeah.
I'm back now. Thank you guys for keeping people entertained in my absence.
No problem.
Oh, of course. Kester wanted to know when we're gonna run my tabletop again.
We can schedule that soon.
Okay, anyway, continue.
All right. Next up, from Glarung, are you excited for us to read Swolbrand?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Swolbrand is one of the favorite things that I'm very excited. Some of the scenes in Swolbrand are some of my favorite scenes that I have written. I wish I could tell you more without just completely spoiling everything forever. But yeah, there's some great stuff in there. Actually,
no, it's great. I've already hyped the book a little bit by posting one of your quotes from that you gave to some of your beta readers, and I think it's perfect as a hype because it doesn't reveal anything, but it does get people excited. And that is you are quoted as saying, "I think Soulbrand is the first book I've ever written that answers more questions than it poses."
Yeah, that's actually something that I said that is probably a lie. It is definitely a thing that I said, though. Yeah, it's I don't know. Well, so you have both read parts of it, at least. I don't know if you finished it, but do you feel like it answers more questions than it asks?
I think that we are the wrong people to ask that question
yeah,
because
that's true.
we know Like there are things that that I think may actually be a question being raised that we just look at that and go and are able to see like, oh, that's referencing this thing over here that none of your other readers know about.
Yeah,
no. As somebody who finished the beta, it definitely left me with a lot more questions. Like it answered some. It's like, here we'll give you these, and then but we're gonna give you these instead. And you're just like, well then, that's my life,
All right,
I guess.
so my hype is full of lies, is what you're saying. That's fine. That makes sense. Okay, good answer. I'm going to bring somebody else up on the stage. Hi.
Hello. I go by Sterling, which is a nickname I had way before I read the Arcane Ascension books.
Perfect. You were already a villain.
Yes, exactly. Anyways, my question is, since Tides is the best Dominion in existence, why haven't we seen a badass character with it yet?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure it would be fair for me to spoil too much on this subject. Okay, I'm just going to be very vague and say someone other than me is writing a Tides specialized character. I hope that you get a chance to see that character soon. I am personally incredibly hyped to see that character, but I am not the one writing that character. And so, yeah, we'll see. I can't make promises on when that's going to be visible to you guys, but I'm hugely excited. And so you will hopefully see a Tides character soon. We'll see.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am also thrilled to be able to see a character that thinks with portals.
Yeah. Portals are great.
Let's see. Also from Sterling, has Karis ever used the Dominion Breaker to make a sandwich?
Depends on what point in the timeline we're talking. So I'm going to say that, like, Weapons and Wielders timeline, the answer would be no. Arcane Ascension timeline, the answer might be yes. So there you go. All right, I'm going to bring somebody else up.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, my question is, do knowledge elementals learn similarly to like how machine learning works?
Depends on the specific knowledge elemental. So elementals are a broad enough category that they encompass things that are very close to human, all the way to things that might be more in a machine learning style category, to things that might be completely different from our concept of a learning structure, like something that's more insectoid or that sort of thing. So it's a great question. Some of them are going to be like that. Someone like Researcher, for example, is almost human in terms of thought process and learning.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
All right. Next up from Techmaster, how do you come up with the names of characters and locations?
Well, we kind of already went over that earlier, so I'm gonna skip doing too much on that one, but I'll just say briefly lots of different sources of inspiration. Some real world characters, some other fantasy games, sometimes just RPG campaigns, etc.
That's fair. In that case, from the accident, who would win, Steele or Karis?
So if Steele is writing the book, Steele. Aside from that, it actually depends on the point in time you're talking. So this actually gets into considerably more spoilers than you would probably expect it to, because Steele is actually a much more important character than the jokes of stab to the stabbing, etc. seem to imply. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable answering this question in an honest fashion. So I'm gonna give you the very point in time answer, and I'm gonna leave it at that because you guys don't know who Steele really is yet, and I'm sure you're all very eager to know. Okay, I'm gonna bring the next person up from the audience.
Hello. Thank you. You mentioned the difficulty of working with video game publishers. What are some difficulties working with audiobook publishers, since there's such a difference in the self-publishing date and the audio coming out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would not say that that is necessarily a difficulty in working with a publisher, so much as that what it comes down to is that I have one of the absolute best narrators in the entire business. Nick Podell is just phenomenal, and that means that Nick Podell's schedule is booked sometimes more than a year in advance, sometimes 2 years in advance. What my publisher and I try to do is give Nick an estimate on when my books are going to be available for recording. But for things that are a year or two out, there's no way to do that accurately. So we try to book a slot into Nick's schedule for Nick to record something, and then if necessary, that slot will be moved. If it has to be moved on my side, it'll be moved on my side. If it has to be moved on Nick's side, it'll be moved on Nick's side. It's a logistics thing with figuring that out with the narrator. And then even after the narrator starts, it takes a considerable amount of time for Nick to go through the book and record it. My books are long. Like, I think that the current one that's coming out tomorrow is about 17 hours. That translates to probably 10 or more. I don't actually know how many hours for Nick to do it. Probably at least 10 hours per recorded hour, probably more than that. And so, that might be several weeks of work to record that much, depending on how many hours per day he can record without ruining his voice. And then beyond that, there's also the time it takes to edit all of that content on the publisher's side. So there is a lot going into the recording stuff. For other authors that do the simultaneous releases, they do that by delaying their Kindle version until the audio is ready. And they will often have other narrators that are more freely available to record whenever the book is ready. So if I had a different narrator that was not popular as Nick, I would consider doing something like that. But realistically, Nick being one of the best in the business, we've got to wait for Nick, and I think it's worth waiting.
I definitely agree. I am very eager to hear Nick's rendition.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. From Laura, what can you tell us about the etymology of Rin Jaden's name?
Yeah, fantastic. There are some minor spoilers here, but I'm going to give you any. So, Rin Jaden's name is actually derived from a Artinian name, which is closer to the Japanese language. So what we have been Romanizing her name as Wrynn. It actually would be more like Rin for Rin. And so if you look at Carefully Worded Wishes when that comes out, she will spell her name Rin. And then Jaden is derived from something else that I think is probably a little bit too spoily to say much about, but it is related to some of the noble houses and some of the factions involved on Artinia. And I don't want to say too much about that without revealing who those factions are and the relationships there. But it's a faction-oriented name. Good question. All right. Sorry, sipping some water, and I'm going to bring the.
Yeah. Is there a static number of possible dominions?
If you're asking if Karis is going to blow up any, then
more asking like if all the dominions were possible in like a plane, is it possible for all the dominions to be present? Or I guess. Is there a set number of dominions, basically?
It's a really interesting question, and I'm going to say that the answer is no, but it is largely a classification issue, because dominions are a term that humans use to conceptualize areas of space. And it is possible that other spaces could exist that could be classified as dominions at different points in time, or that new areas of space could be created or destroyed that would have properties that could have them be called dominions. So I would say that the number of dominions is not strictly set. It's a good question.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. From Blows Up a Lot, will Valian ever make an appearance in one of your books?
He already has. Dun dun dun. And next question, I'm going to bring somebody up.
Hi, non-specific again.
Hi, non-specific.
I was wondering if anyone in the Ascension universe has tried building a spaceship, and if like spaceships would be worthwhile to travel the worlds and dominions, or does travel sorcery just kind of make it obsolete?
It depends on how you classify a spaceship, but I would say that the answer is yes. Travel sorcery undoubtedly makes a conventional spaceship in our traditional usage of spaceship less useful. But not everybody has access to travel sorcery in the same way that. And there are other limitations in play there. So things that are analogous to spaceships have been built. Whether or not those have been successful, you'll have to see in future books.
All right, thanks.
Uh-huh.
All right. From Subject 1337, do you get nervous prior to the release of a new book? And does the same apply to the audio version?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm crazy nervous every time, every single time. And that is, I think, pretty much standard for most authors. I talked to some of my other author buddies about this, and we all basically expect the worst whenever one of these things is going to happen. In spite of doing everything that we can to prepare, no matter how many books you've put out, there is always just waiting for something to happen that is the twist of fate that means that some book is not going to be successful. And so, yeah, of course I'm nervous. It's a perfectly valid question. And yes, absolutely. I think I have not met the author yet that is not nervous the day before a book release. They might exist, but I'm not one of them. All right. Let me pull up the next person. Oh, we've got a Zig. Hi, Zig.
Yes, we have a Zig. You are cutting out a little bit more, so we from the chat are going to ask, could you relog? Apparently that helps with Discord, whatever they're doing on the back end.
Yeah, and I'm going to use that as an opportunity to take a. So I'm going to reboot my computer, and I will be back in a few minutes.
All right.
Guess it's just back to me and you, Kester.
I guess.
What should we talk about?
I don't know. We could spoil the Imperial Galactic Army of Matre.
I mean, we could spoil the Imperial Galactic Army of Matre. I don't think Ruru would get too mad about that. Who else was in that with us? I think Rue was in there and Valen.
Yes.
That was it.
Well, there's the what originated it. Jack and
right.
Ryan.
Drunk Annex. So, Kester, the real question is that I'm sure is on everyone's mind is when is Dyson going to show up in your tabletop to flirt with the entire party base?
I don't know when that will happen. Although, if you want to set some time aside, they are the Discord Arcane Ascension tabletop. The next game is going to the Unclaimed Lands.
Oh, perfect! Can't wait. I have tons of free time. You just let me know. And I'll be there.
All right. I mean, I know that Cryptid is listening, so the fact that you just said that may have just derailed where the PCs are going to be going.
Well, I mean, there's several places we could be at this point. Like, I don't know when your timeline's taking place.
It's the official ruling on that is that we're basically nothing in the Arcane Ascension books is canon. It's just sort of like
That makes sense.
its own canon. But because we know what's going on, like the expedition is still a thing.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes sense.
But yeah, trying to keep the weirdness of the storyline of Arcane Ascension out of it, so that the story it doesn't get bogged down in trying to figure out like what those details are going to be, and it focuses on just what the players are doing.
Gotcha. So similar to my tabletop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same sort of context for what you know, and then just make it up as you go along.
Kind of, yeah.
Ish. Yeah.
Which, by the way, if anybody listening doesn't know, there are announcements on the Discord for a tabletop that I run for people who won a lottery on the Discord. That is a Arcane Ascension tabletop RPG live play. It isn't recorded per Andrew's request, but it is broadcast for people to listen in on. And it uses the players are using a variant of the LARP rule set for the characters, and we've got a wayfarer and a summoner and an architect and a transmuter.
Nice.
And a shadow. No, sorry. Analyst. Sorry, Magpie.
Do you think Rue or Ro, whatever the kids are calling him these days, will ever do a live play game?
I suspect that is something that may be being worked on, but nothing definitive
so
yet. And sorry, Texas. Sorry. We have a champion. The most fashionable of champions.
Feels bad. You guys are missing a lot of good attunements there.
That's it. Yes, they are missing a lot of attunements, and they also really made me put in some work with the attunements that got picked.
That's fair. I still think Shadow's one of my favorites.
Shadow's amazing.
It really is. It's not as good. So my I can't say. Well, actually, can I say my favorite Dominion or my favorite attunement? I should say.
Yes, all of the well. It depends.
I think mine's one that's known. I think mine's one that's known.
Okay.
Abjurer?
Yeah, no, that's
that's my
yeah. We don't have
favorite.
to wipe anybody's mind. That's you can say that one.
Yeah, it's my favorite. Just all the possibilities of it is so good, so good.
Mine, of course, has to be Kester's secret secondary attunement that nobody knows about. Of course, that one being the attunement called. And sorry, did I cut out there?
About it.
Did I cut out there? I don't think I cut out there. Everyone heard that, right?
No, you didn't cut out. You're good. Redacted.
Just make Zig annoyed.
But yeah, just like think about it. It's well, actually, do they know what the Abjure attunement does? Like, that's the real question.
I have mentioned it on the Discord, so I think it's out there. There's no specifics are known about it, but in general, the Abjurer attunement is supposedly has the ability to shut down other attunements.
That's not incorrect. So yeah, that's pretty close. I think the inspiration for Vellum is actually in the chat somewhere. I'm not gonna out them. Vellum is still one of my favorite teachers.
Vellum is great.
Vellum is great. There's several great characters. I love these books. Vellum is my mom. I'm actually like reading this chat as it goes by, so
That's good. I'm still stuck up near the top.
yeah, you're fine. I mean, I could like read.
I'm looking at the fact that this is on like max on like slow mo, and I've got 380 plus new messages ahead of where
it's
I'm
going.
at.
Yeah, I am hydrated. I am drinking water regularly. So I actually just finished my workout before this stream started. So I will stream probably eventually. I've been busy, man. All busy. I'm trying to go through these like quick. So
Okay.
like just get scroll up there. Good. I don't have to talk anymore.
Thank you for holding down the fort, Nathan. Can you guys hear me better now?
We won't know until you start like a
tirade.
Answer. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Let me bring somebody up for a question, and then I'll get into that.
Okay.
All right. I have clicked. Hi.
Oh, hi. Okay. So in Weapons and Wielders 2, there's a point where Karis is talking about a certain individual. In case anybody hasn't actually read that yet.
Thank you for not
he
following.
says that person reminds him greatly of Jonan. Is that just him being nostalgic, or is there something more to that?
It's not actually Jonan, but good question. That is nostalgia.
Okay, cool.
Fantastic question though. And okay. maybe we'll see more of Jonan someday.
Next time on.
Yeah.
All right. Next up from Cryptid. How accurate is my fan art of my beloved Ari?
Oh, it's perfectly accurate. So I'm going to say in general that all of your fan art, all of everyone's fan art is accurate. So I don't believe that I get to dictate what my characters look like unless people are doing things like deliberately whitewashing my characters or that sort of thing. So aside from that, your headcanon for what a character looks like is what that character looks like. But your artwork is like your personal artwork, Cryptid of Ari, is phenomenal. So good stuff. Oh, right. I'm supposed to bring another person up. Yeah. Also, how's my sound?
It's good. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
One second. Sorry, I'm in the middle of a call.
All right, I'll bring up somebody else, I guess.
Oh, that's fine. I can just ask a question while we wait for that to clear up. All right. Krita asks, is it canon that Korin was immune to the powers of the Joragumo because he's asexual?
Yes, that's canon.
All right.
That being said, there may be mind-altery type of entities that do not operate purely on someone's sexual interests, but I do think that giving him a little bit of an ace superpower there was fun. So yeah, that's canon.
All right. Glaurung is still held up. So
sorry, that was a call about my second vaccination shot.
Oh, no, that's fine. Are you good now?
Okay, so just to make sure this is clear, this is Glaurung from the Discord. If would you say that Sarah's invoker ability makes her a magical girl?
Yes, Sarah is absolutely a magical girl. Good question. That's canon now. Sarah is a magical girl.
All right.
That's that. Great question. Yes. Sarah is definitely a magical girl. Hopefully someday we will have more magical girls in this universe.
All right. Let's see. This wasn't marked as a question, but I like it. And I'm going to put my own spin on it because it's hilarious. From the accident, who do you least want fan art of? And why is it Magnus?
Oh, yeah. Magnus Cadence is a horrible person. So I suppose you could have some fan art of Magnus, like getting his just desserts or that sort of thing. But let's not do any like cool Magnus stuff because Magnus Cadence is not cool. He is a monster. So, and not like a cool monster, like the really bad kind of monster, like just a terrible person. Okay, so good question. I'm going to bring the next person up.
Hello
Hi.
again. So does anybody in the story have a flying ship or island similar to the one in Diamantine? And is it future Corrin?
Good question. Corrin may look into alternate means of transit someday, but in the meantime, yeah, there are people who have airships, and there are other floating islands in the setting.
Awesome.
I'm actually going to expand on that a little bit before we get another question, because it's an interesting one. So the floating island thing is one of the first visuals that I had for the continent of Kaldwin. And originally, it was going to be a multi-perspective story where Corrin was going to be one of the protagonists, and the other protagonist was an airship captain from Caleford that was attempting to reach a sky island. And so that whole secondary character thing has been dropped for the time being, but I just thought that might be a fun tidbit to drop for you guys about what originally was going to be in Arcane Ascension.
All right. From non-specific, if they wanted to, could Valian or any of the Vekes eat the sun?
Depends on your definition of eat. So if you mean eat in the like nom having it as a sandwich kind of sense, no, you know what? The answer is still yes either way. Yeah, Valian could eat the sun. So there you go. Valian could eat the sun. Have fun with that knowledge, guys.
Valian is the Sun Eater confirmed.
Yes. Well, have fun with that fandom. Okay, I'm going to bring somebody else up to chat.
Wow, it's me again. Non-specific.
Hi, non-specific.
So I was wondering how many, what dominions and how many dominions would a sorcerer need to replicate the summoner's standard attunement functions?
It depends on how you define standard attunement functions. So, a lot, actually. I would have to actually check in order to give you a solid number, but more than 3 in order to do the very basic stuff for contracting and summoning and that sort of thing.
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. It is a really good question, and it's something that I'm probably going to dip into AA4, AA5 maybe, about how specific attunement functions work. Yeah. I'd have to look up the number for that, though. Okay. Kester, next question.
All right. From Laura, can you give us an estimate of which book will have the first known transfemme character?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Laura, you broke him.
No, I just don't know whether or not a specific character has already been identified as transfemme, which means that I haven't done a good enough job with it, which means that the answer is no. So what I'm going to say is that I will make a clear effort to have a transfemme character within the next few books in a fashion where it is obvious to readers that the character is transfemme. The difficulty there is that culturally they don't use the same terminology that we do. So even the types of lampshading that I've done for specific trans characters in the past, it's easy to miss. And I want these things to be obvious to the reader, but in a way that doesn't seem like somebody is dropping the fact that they are transgender in a conversation without context. So to give you an example, a good way to pursue something like that from my perspective would be having somebody realizing that they are trans from a viewpoint character's perspective, or somebody who is going through that and revealing it to somebody because they are working on, say, trying to get a shape changer attunement because they identify as being female and would like to be able to change their body to match their image. Those are things that I would like to explore in the story. Those are things that people do in universe, but it isn't something that is a subject matter that I've been able to explore adequately in books up to this point, and I want to make sure that I do that kind of thing justice. So it's a really important topic, and it's a really excellent question to ask. It is something that I absolutely do want to explore, but since I am not trans femme myself, I need to be cautious about doing it in ways that do the concept justice, and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or offend anybody by doing something that is caricaturish or inappropriate. So I think that's the best answer I can give to that. I will make an effort to do that properly sometime soon. I don't know which character I'm going to have come out as that yet, so I don't know which book is going to be the first book that will show that kind of thing. I hope that answers your question adequately, and I apologize if I've not done a good enough job with representation for that up to this point in time. I hope that answers your question. I will bring up the next person.
Hey there. This is Apex Complex again. I thought I'd round it out with a less intense question, and I was just curious if you had a rough hour count for how many hours you've spent speculating and theory crafting, I guess, around the possibilities behind Sarah's Invoker attunement and just random monsters that she could possibly form contracts with.
I have come up with all sorts of nonsense for that. I don't have an hour count for you, but any kind of contract-based attunement already just has absolute brokenness built into it. And Sarah's is the most broken of the bunch. So yeah, there's all sorts of fun nonsense for that. I've already implied some things that she has looked into for broken combinations with that. I'm not going to say too much more because A3 is not out on Audible yet, and people have not listened to it yet. But there's some fun stuff in there. There are even some hints on things that she's looked into in A2 as well. Hopefully we'll see some truly broken ridiculousness at some point in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next up, just so you can gonna put this one in just so you can address it again, from Blows Up a Lot. Can we get metal posters of the characters or the swords? That would be awesome.
I would love to do things like that, but that is largely in Podium's court at this point. They are probably going to be handling like any kind of merch. So we will see where that goes. I'm certainly talking to them about getting things like that, but I don't have any kind of dates or anything like that because it's really up to them.
And from Glaurung, does Ayara know the true purpose of the Dawnfire and Nightfrost?
Ascribing purpose to them may be the wrong way of looking at it, but she knows the important stuff that she would want to know about that subject. Okay, I'm going to bring up the next person.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, Cringe Lord. I've been lurking for quite a while and read, I think, all of them now like 3 times. So the question that I had, I've been thinking, I just been reading through Diamantine again and got through the intermission where Patrick was talking about power levels. And I've been thinking, it seems like a lot of the most powerful people that we encounter, they all have something special occur either in their origin story or throughout their life. Like, Kiris has the sword, and Sarah ends up drinking the mana potion. Are there examples of characters, maybe I missed it or we just haven't seen them yet, that have simply grown in power through ordinary hard work to a degree, like on the same level as, say, Kiris or even the gods themselves?
Excellent question. You have not seen most of those characters yet that have more of a, I would say, standard background. So there are people who are on a somewhat comparable level at, say, the Diamantine tournament book that are basically normal people. But it depends on how you define that. So, for example, you have Antonia Hartigan in the tournament. Antonia Hartigan is essentially a normal human being, but has the advantage of affluence, being a member of House Hartigan. So whether you would consider that to be a comparable advantage to, somebody like what Karis has, I would say it's not quite the same thing, but it's still an advantage. In terms of people who come from a more of a ordinary background that are still powerhouses, Tervis. Tervis is absolutely a threat to people like Karis in that book and in future content. And he is basically just a guy. And he trains really hard. He learns a lot of things. He uses his cunning very effectively. And because of that, he is able to keep up with the people who are the absolute strongest people in that tournament.
Thank you. That's a really good answer.
Yeah.
All right. Next up from Sterling, is Kaldwin real, or is Karis in an elaborate illusion?
Kaldwin is real. Good question, but I don't want to like send the theory crafters off in ridiculous. No, Kaldwin is real.
That was a pretty bad cutout right there.
Oh no. I guess I could switch to push to talk and see if that helps.
Might as well try, and I'll let you know if you cut out again.
All right. I am testing with push to talk.
Well, that was fine. So.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it holds up for longer answers. So I am going to bring up another person.
Howdy, Human USB again. So I really love the world that you've created, but we can see that there's obviously 3 tiers, or even maybe 4 tiers of people. Royalty with attunement, common person attunement, common person, and then peasant. Are we ever going to get a book that's just from they're not royalty, they don't have magic, head tattoo, just normal, plain Jane, I'm off to get my coffee person, and not I can blow up the world just by thinking about it kind of person?
It's a valid question, and I think there's room for that kind of content in the setting, but I will probably not write it anytime in the near future. It is possible that I will have other people write that type of thing in universe at some point, or maybe I'll do it at some point myself. But for the moment, I already have 3 series going in this setting. I already basically have 2 more at least that I've announced. It's going to be a while before I can get to any additional content beyond that scope. So I would love to show more ordinary human being slice of lifestyle content at some point, but it'll probably be a while. So definitely a valid question, and thank you for asking.
All right. From Techmaster, how do you visualize what your characters look like? Do you have any inspirations from other media?
Yeah, absolutely. I will sometimes build little folders for artwork for characters that serve as inspiration, but many of those pictures will not actually look like the other pictures. They will just have individual elements that speak to me about that character's design. So let's take Patrick, for example. I have had several different versions of Patrick for art inspiration that look like virtually completely different people, but have things about them that say Patrick to me, like a particular element of Patrick's build or his smile or that sort of thing. Just individual features that I'm like, that looks like Patrick's facial expression. And so I look at character physical designs in that sense in the same way that I tend to look at characters' other attributes, which is I tend to break things down into individual sort of bullet points rather than looking at them holistically, which might be a little bit weird. And sometimes I'll see a specific character and, on a piece of artwork, and I'll say, that just looks like that character. That does happen. But I draw inspiration from a lot of different sources. And so my mental image of any individual character is sort of an aggregate of a whole bunch of different images from different sources and media. Did that cut out as much as I was cutting out before, or is the push to talk working better?
There was no cutouts. There was one audio tear, but it didn't you didn't lose the word or anything from it.
Sounds like an improvement. So I guess I will stick with push to talk, and I will bring up the next person. Hello. It looks like you are currently muted.
Sorry about that. The accident. If you were to take a judgment, which spire would you visit?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the difficulty there is that I actually like the attunements from some spires more than others, but I like the challenges in certain spires more than others. So that's kind of a thing that's difficult to balance. I think there's a good chance that I'd end up going Caleford. I think I'd be more likely to not die if I went to that spire. So I think ultimately that is probably the best answer. I would probably go for self-preservation and go Tiger Spire.
Very good answer. Thank you.
All right. Next up from Sterling. What spoilers were you about to tell us when you heard that I gave Talion the nickname Tay-Tay?
That is a ridiculous nickname. And I don't remember what type of spoilers I was about to tell you, but I can come up with something. So Tay, Vey, etc. are all prefixes that are used in the Liadrin language with specific meanings. I don't do a lot of conlang stuff, but if you see characters that have components to their names that are repeated in other parts of the story, even if those are slightly different, there's probably a reason for that. To give you an example, the Lien at the end of Talion is the same as the Lian at the end of Celise Lian, just through the filter of another language. So there are a lot of things like that in setting. Just got to keep your eyes open for them. And I will bring somebody else up for a question.
Hello, it's Neonpur again. I just wanted to ask, have you ever had any instances where you found yourself accidentally writing something too similar to something you had just been playing or reading or watching?
Not generally right afterward, but I cannot tell you the number of times where I've been like halfway through writing something and then read a new Brandon Sanderson novel and been like, I have to change everything now because Brandon Sanderson already did it. Or I'll just see something in other books that are very similar. It's difficult because a lot of us are just drawing from very similar established tropes or established characters. To give you a good example of this, Little Blue in Will White's Cradle series is very similar to Syl in the Stormlight Archives, and they are both similar to Dawn in Weapons and Wielders. That's not because any of us were borrowing from each other, at least as far as I'm aware. It's because I think, at least, I would speculate, I haven't talked to Will about this, we are probably all borrowing from Tinkerbell. And there's a bunch of other characters that borrow from Tinkerbell too. I mean, you look at Navi in The Legend of Zelda, that sort of thing. And tons of characters have had inspiration from older characters like that. And so it's easy to look at these things and say, oh, this particular current writer is just ripping off this other current writer. But in actuality, we're actually ripping off somebody from 50 or 100 years ago. We're still ripping somebody off, but it's probably not who you think we're ripping off. So, yeah, I generally don't find myself adopting ideas from things that I'm like in the process of currently playing or reading, unless I'm doing it deliberately. But I absolutely draw heavily from things that I like read or watched or that sort of thing in my childhood, and a lot of other contemporary authors do the same, and so you end up with some similar things happening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up, from Overstarched, what made you choose Nick Padell as the voice actor for Arcane Ascension books? And what sort of turnaround time does it take from providing the script to complete, ready to launch audiobook?
So, good questions. I didn't pick Nick Podell. Podium Publishing, my audiobook publisher, picked Nick Podell. I am hugely lucky that they did, but it was not actually my decision. The publisher made that choice. The same is true for my other narrators like Susie Jackson and Stephen West for my other books. And so, yeah, the publisher almost always makes the decision on those things unless the author is contacting that narrator directly without any kind of publisher involved, or you get something like the publisher contacting a narrator on behalf of like their publisher in advance. That type of thing can happen. Or you can get edge cases like with what happened with Will White and Travis, where Will contracted Travis first for the first few books, and then they got a publisher after that and continued to stick together. So in my case, the publisher handled it entirely. In terms of turnaround time, it absolutely depends on the narrator's availability and like whether or not they're recording multiple projects at once, the length of the book, etc. I would say for me, usually from when I hand the script off to Podium to it getting done, usually takes about 6 months. And that is a combination of waiting for a time slot with Nick Podell actually recording the book, and then all of the like editing process and sound stuff that happens on the publisher's end after that. I'm going to pull up one more person, and then I'm going to take a brief break after that one.
Hello. I had a question for you about Weapon Wielders, I believe it's Diamantine. In that we learned something interesting about Princess Edria's song, about her particular magic. I was wondering, considering how unusual that setup is, are there any side effects or like downsides to how she's set up?
An ordinary person under ordinary circumstances, you absolutely would not want the setup that Edria Song has. Whether or not she has those downsides, I am going to leave for future books because it's very important, but it is a fantastic thing for you to be asking and thinking about. Your average person would not do well with Edria Song's setup. So, good question. I'm going to leave it at that for the moment, and I am going to take another brief break.
All right. Dyson, you still there?
Oh yeah, I'm still here. I just mute myself because I'm driving around and doing work, and I don't want to be noisy.
That's
I'm
fair.
just not risking it, you know.
Mhm,
I'm almost done with my day, but I am almost done, so that's nice. So, never know. Yeah, I still don't know what to talk about. I'm just glad everyone's having a good time. Is everybody having a good time?
They can't
Aw.
answer out loud.
I know. I can read it though. I got Dyson. Are you doing good work? Cryptid named a horse in Breath of the Wild, which makes me excitingly happy because I love that game. There's so many text questions left. Yeah, I don't.
I
think
know.
he's gonna...
I know.
Give us secrets, Dyson. Like the secrets Dominion. Okay, sure. Give me a second. I'll post it. They're having a great time. Somebody said no, I'm not. Woo, yuppers. We are. This is what people want. What do you people want from us? I don't know what to give them.
It's fine. It's fine. It's
Wait,
fine.
Dyson, what are your opinions on Dyson's chicken? Oh fuck, I love chicken nuggies with like I love mixing barbecue sauce with ranch, half and half. Dope. Love to dip my nuggies in barbecue sauce and ranch. Do the disco.
Okay.
How do you like your nuggies, Kester?
I mean, usually spicy.
Yeah, no one likes. I'm mad at you still for that. The Dyson cooking novella is actually already in my house. It has every recipe I have. It's in my journal that I have for Dyson. Dyson has a personal journal that I write. That's hidden at every game.
That would be a hilarious like YouTube channel, like cooking with Dyson, And just
And we're done.
All right, so yeah, exactly. Like first, we want to make sure that you have all your ingredients laid out within easy reach, and then all you have to do is, and we're done.
When will Dyson get a? I mean, I don't even know if Dyson's going to be in the books. I know he was mentioned, but like, there is potential romantic partners for Dyson. I don't know where Ro will take it, but there's also like Dyson's kind of a hoe. Ketchup is ketchup. It's not a smoothie. I don't care what anyone says. I'm trying to keep up with all these.
Yeah, no, it's fair. We don't actually have a definitive answer of the expedition stuff. It might happen. It might not happen. I have my own personal guess that if it is going to happen, it's gonna be somewhere around Weapon and Wielders 5, maybe 6. At the pace that they're going. I could be wrong. But that's just like me taking a stab in the dark based on how the Weapon and Wielders story is progressing. What about Dyson?
Yeah.
What about for you? What's your favorite standard Dominion?
Like just like like super base, like or like prime or any.
Yeah, base 60. What?
I don't like it. That's hard, man. Like I think my favorite would probably be like tides or breath. I like travel a lot, but that's because teleportation is just like easy mode. But also I like the simplicity of like motion a lot. But that's why I made Dyson.
Motion is much more versatile than like in like when we played the LARP, like the basic effects listed. It is way more versatile than what's listed.
Oh yeah, well you could do a lot with it. That's one of the things I was getting into. Is like later in the LARP was like trying to do.
You got to make your own.
How much am I allowed to
stuff.
talk about keys? How much am I allowed to talk about keys and stuff like that? Have they heard about like
keys exist?
I think it's insight.
They know what keys are.
Insight and supremacy, like that. Those two, like the reversal key and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I was like trying to make
even
spells
without
that like
using,
removed. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Even without using keys, though, just motion is super versatile. You just gotta bend it to your own wants. You have to make your own stuff. Just blasting around motion essence will only get you so far.
Yeah, but I was actually working like before the thing was like removing like momentum from the equation with Dominion sorcery, so I could go faster. Like I would just stop any like friction. I was just like, just get rid of it.
That's fair.
I think it's in Insight, not Supremacy anymore, because that Dominion got split up when he rewrote like all the Dominions.
Oh no, that's a thing that I've spoiled on the Discord. Is supremacy is what has the reversal key.
Okay, I don't know if it still does, but it did at one point. Tabitha just asked, "Is supremacy?" They want me. Oh my god! Now like I'm on pressure. You guys want me to say something?
Say what?
You guys want me to say? I'm trying.
What's going on down there in the present?
They want me to say, I think one of the quotes. Okay. Give me a second, guys. I'm like nervous now. Luck had nothing to do with it, sis. All skill. 10 out of 10. Not a problem, guys. I do this for you. I'm so nervous. Kester Dyson, what do you think Spider Climb would be at if it were covered in... what book do you think Spider Climb would be at if it were covered? I don't know.
Again, like if we're going off of my stab in the dark, it would be sometime in between 5 and 6. If 5 is like where the expedition happens. Yeah.
So Lydia and Dyson, let's go. I'm just like trying to go through. Lydia and Dyson do have another brother. The only reason like he's not really like he has a name. I'd have to like look up the backstory because I haven't played the character in a long time in that regard. But like, It's just like no one played them. Somebody played Lydia. I decided to play Dyson because I liked Lydia's character, and I was like, okay, I want to make this type of character, but I want to have this sort of tie. I'm going to make this style of character that has a different way of, like... So Lydia's very smart and very creative. Dyson's just smart and creative in a different way. Like, he would be considered, like, a jock in a lot of ways, but he's, like, not the stereotypical type of jock. He's, like, he likes to think plans through, but he doesn't always think things through to like the fullest extent. Like, he comes up with good plans, but they're not always thought 100% through. Let's see. Can we get Dyson's impression of "by the power of the stars" quote? Kester, you want to try that one?
Be careful. They're gonna clip that recording.
That's whatever.
You don't want to be stuck with them constantly spamming blah, 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 all the time.
That's fair.
This has been a great conversation. I will save Dyson from having to give out Vellum's stars quote, if that's what we're talking about.
They wanted me to just repeat it. But thank you for saving me.
I think that we're probably ready for another question. Kester, do you want to ask one, or should I bring up someone?
We got one right here. From Sync, how did you go about research for neurodivergent / queer characters that differ from your own experience?
Most of my research has been looking at websites that are specifically designed for people who have specific neurological conditions or people who are neurodivergent in specific ways, so that I can study those things. And then a lot of it comes from talking to people who have those diagnoses. I am privileged to have a number of friends who have a number of different neurodivergent characteristics who have been willing to talk to me about their experiences, how they think, how they approach problem solving, the types of challenges that they run into in day-to-day life, and the experiences that they have in the world in general. So a lot of it is anecdotal from talking with those people, and then I just have gone through a plethora of web resources for more information. Thank you for that question. I'm going to go ahead and bring up somebody from the audience.
Hi, Glowering again, and I've been wondering, with the noble houses of Valia, are any of them is vassalhood essentially a thing? Are any noble houses vassals to other direct vassals to other noble houses, and if so, what house is House Cadence a vassal to?
So, excellent question. Vassaldoms do exist. It uses a fairly standard British knockoff version of the whole system of progression, which name is slipping my mind. But House Cadence is not a vassal to any specific house. Peerage is the word I was looking for. It uses a knockoff of a medieval fantasy version of British peerage. So yes, vassals exist. House Cadence was made a noble house as a result of their actions during a specific war. They were given their own lands and their own titles, but they are not vassals to a higher level house.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Also from Glaurung, which dominion that we know of do you like the most?
Ooh, do I like the most? Oh man, that's a tricky question. So aside from the things that are just min-maxy ones, I would say I really like the concept of the Dominion of Transcendence. You have seen very little of how that works, but I like beneficial magic. I like magic that is used for things like buff spells and things like that. And Transcendence has some of the most fun ones. Insight's another good one. Basically, I like a lot of the stuff that deals with giving benefits to other people. Destiny is another good one. And so, yeah, those unusual but powerful buff spell ones are some of my favorite flavor-wise.
We got something to pull up?
Yeah. I am grabbing somebody right now.
Hello, me telling Solaris again. Is Patrick secretly a bi-wife elemental?
Is he a what elemental? I couldn't quite hear you.
A bi-wife elemental.
I would not say that Patrick is any kind of elemental, in that Patrick is too flexible to be considered an elemental of any kind. Patrick is a well-rounded person. Patrick, being more serious, Patrick is the most human person in my cast. So I realize that that is not quite a direct answer to your question, but yeah. No, Patrick is the most human person I have in my story. Good question.
Okay. From DeLorean, of all the magic weapons mentioned in the series, which would you want to wield?
Probably not the high-profile ones. So the Dominion Breaker is too dangerous. That would just kill me, like, a lot. I like Dawn. Dawn and I would actually probably get along really well. So teasing aside, Dawn's actually not a bad option. But from a practical standpoint, if I was in the setting of Arcane Ascension and I had Dawn, I would still just die pretty much immediately, because somebody else who is more powerful would take Dawn from me. So Dawn would be a fun buddy to have, but probably a bad pick for me personally. I would say that, honestly, even in this world or other setting, Diamantine is actually probably the best choice, because just carrying Diamantine is a huge defensive bonus, which means that when people inevitably try to kill me to take the sword, I would have more of a chance of surviving that than with most of the other weapons. And then on Earth with a weapon like that, like, I'm probably not going to be walking around with a giant sword regardless, but a sword like that, at least, there are practical applications if, say, I get hit by a car or something. Now the magic sword protects me from that. So, useful.
Okay. An interesting answer. You're allowed to be wrong.
What was I? So am I supposed to pick Lux Touch? Is that the answer?
Obviously.
I mean, Lux Touch, I couldn't take care of Lux Touch properly, and Lux Touch would get bored and leave.
Okay, fine. I would posit with the abilities granted by Lux Touch, you could make sure that it didn't get bored.
Maybe. I don't know. It's a good fanfic of writing about myself that I can think about at some point. But in the meantime, I'm going to bring somebody else up for another question.
Hi, non-specific again. And this time, I have a very simple question. It's just a death battle what if. Do you think Virex Sewell could take on all 6 god beasts simultaneously?
No, not all 6. Good question.
All right.
I apologize for the very brief answer there, but since I have not given enough context on the power levels of Virex Sewell or the God Beasts in the books that are available to people, I don't think I should go into too much detail on that. So if people want to ask more who would win questions, please feel free to, but I will be able to give more detailed answers for characters that have shown up and demonstrated more of their full abilities in the books up to this point.
All right, from Head Trauma, would the merch rights holder consider doing group buy single run items, for example, attunement teas or mugs?
Yes, that is probably something that they will consider doing, but I don't have any super inside information on any plans that they have to do that any time in the near future. But yes, that is absolutely something that has been talked about. Okay, I'm going to bring up the next person.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
I go by Magnus Savage in the Discord, and my question was, of all the magical items shown in Arcane Ascension, which would you most like to see more fan art of?
Oh, more fan art. That's a fantastic question. Let's see. I don't think we've had enough Dawnbringer fan art yet. I think getting some more Dawnbringer fan art would be fantastic. More Celeste Leanne fan art too. So I'm a sword nut, so it's mostly going to be swords I'm talking about. I'd also like to see some interesting Jaden Box artwork though. So there's some options for you to think about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I would also like to thank all of the fan artists who have been doing fan art so far. I love seeing fan art. I'm probably not supposed to admit that, but I do.
I bet that you would get a lot more fan art if you released what the runes were on those items.
Oh boy, I'll think on it. It's tricky. So the reason why I don't show the runes isn't any kind of deep lore or anything. It's because I hand draw most of the runes so they look terrible. When I get more professional runes, which I'm doing for some of them, I will release more of that. But for the moment, I don't think that my hand-drawn runes are at a level of quality where I necessarily want people doing too much with it. I don't know. I'll think on it. Maybe I'll put more of them out there.
I mean, they're just going to get redrawn by other people's writing styles. So
that's absolutely true. So maybe I will give some canonical runes for some more of my magic swords and such soon.
I know a lot of people that will really like that. All right. Next up from Valorian, which dominion would you consider to be the strangest? By that, I mean the way it operates or influences the world is just odd compared to standard physics.
Interesting question. I feel like Dream is the obvious answer here, but I'm trying to think if there are any better answers than Dream. Shade is an interesting one as well because the way that it operates isn't directly analogous to anything that we would consider normal in our world. Whereas something like Dream, there are so many stories about people traveling through dream states or things having a dream-like impact on reality that I think that while it would be strange in terms of the way that it distorts the world, changing the world more heavily, Shade would be stranger in some respects from the perspective of people from our Earth looking at another setting. I'm not going to get into too much detail about how exactly Shade functions, but there's some weirdness there, and you'll see a little bit more of that in the next few books. Okay, I'm going to grab somebody for another question.
Question for you about the Necromancer attunement. The attacks, the attacks that were being used that were summoning bone. If somebody did an attack like that, and by some crazy miracle, a fragment of that bone attack ended up in our world in the hand of a doctor or a scientist, and they did a DNA test on that bone, what would that reflect?
It would reflect the specific portion of the dominion of bone that the source material was being conjured from. So it would not necessarily look like a bone from any kind of creature in our world.
Yeah, part of me was wondering if there could be if science developed along that track, there'd be like a way to reverse, engineer it to the summoner. If it was like their DNA, for example.
It would not be the summoner's DNA. So it would not necessarily be reverse engineerable from our world's perspective without vastly greater amounts of data on how the magic system as a whole works. It's an interesting question. The ability to track, say, a bone conjured through a spell back to the summoner generally would require tools that are outside of the frame of reference of what modern, normal, mundane science has available.
That's fair. I was just curious about that because it was a very evocative image in the story of summoning spears of bone.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked the imagery, and it is an excellent question. The problem with trying to analyze something like that from our world's standpoint is that there are things that exist in the setting of Arcane Ascension that don't really exist here, and thus tracing them through our instruments that currently exist is not really plausible. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
From Primal Sigma, are there other places similar to the core plane where a smaller subsection of dominions overlap? Like a planet where the presence of the fire and air dominions are felt very strongly, but other dominions aren't readily available.
Yes, there are places like that. Excellent question. And I'm going to grab the next person.
Hey there, Apex Complex again. You mentioned earlier that the attunement, or one of the attunements that rather I guess that you would prefer for yourself would be one that was a little bit more similar to Blue Mage. Assuming that you mean Final Fantasy Blue Mage, which attunement would you say is the most analogous to that concept of the, I guess, Mega Man-esque absorption type thing? If it's not one that we know of yet, obviously that's all right. But if it is, then I'm just curious what your take is on that.
There's a few different options in trying to get that kind of skill set. So Mega Man-ish, going the Mega Man-ish route and like taking powers from other people is probably more like Sovereign. The absorbing things that you are exposed to is much harder. In terms of that, it's hard to draw one-to-one with any specific attunement, but I would say Architect gets you some of that. Conjurer, which you haven't seen a lot of yet, but Conjurer has some potential to do some things like that. And then any of the various contract-oriented attunements like Summoner and Soulblade have potential to make contracts that give you access to other types of magic. So there's some relationship there. But yeah, I would say that from a Mega Man perspective, I'd actually go Sovereign.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask just a quick, I guess, clarification on that? As far as Sovereign goes. Oh, okay. Thank you. Are the gains from the Sovereign attunement, are those permanent?
Not always. It is possible to have more or less permanent gains, and it is possible to have temporary gains.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also from Apex Complex, is there a prevalent character from a video game that provided the majority of inspiration for any of the main characters between War of Broken Mirrors or Arcane Ascension?
Not really. Most of my characters are generally inspired by people who are tabletop or LARP characters. Either people that I have literally played, like Jonan Castrian, or characters like Sarah Shard that was played by somebody else, or, Kester showing up in the books, who was played by Kester here. Most of my characters are not video game inspired to that degree. I do take small elements from video games, but so things like skill sets or names, for example, as I mentioned earlier, Lydia, for example, is named after Rydia from Final Fantasy IV, whereas Sarah Shard actually gets the Rydia Summoner skill set. And then I would say that the most overtly inspired character is actually Reika, in that Reika, part of my inspiration from Reika, in spite of the fact that she eventually was played by somebody in a live-action role-playing game, but part of the original impetus for the idea of Reika was, what if I took the Mist Dragon from Final Fantasy IV and party? And so that's part of the genesis for Reika.
You had a little bit of audio loss on that one.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It was fine. It was the phrase that you missed was the Mist Dragon from Final Fantasy IV, and added it to the party. Yes, somebody. The idea is that the Mist Dragon in Final Fantasy IV is one of the first enemies that you encounter, and in Final Fantasy IV, you're going through this cave of mist and encounter this dragon, and that goes very badly in terms of story things that happen as a result of that. I don't want to spoil this, 30-year-old game, but the idea behind the Karis and Reika thing was that Karis takes a different approach to an encounter that is similar to that and recruits the dragon instead. And so things go from there.
Okay. Do you have another question for me, or should I jump into grabbing the next person?
If there are people waiting, grab someone.
Hello again. My next question is, in an ideal high-budget TV or movie adaptation, which fights from the series would you be most excited to see brought to life?
This is a difficult question to answer because most of them are from either Arcane Ascension 3 or Weapons and Wielders 3. There are lots of earlier ones that I really love, but there are the ones that are on my mind at the moment. I would say top ones from earlier books. The Winter Ball scene in AA2. That whole thing, that would be phenomenal to see, like a high-budget version of the Winter Ball. I would love to see the Pale King fight in Weapons and Wielders 2. And then from War of Broken Mirrors, I would say the first arena fight between Karis and Miros in the first War of Broken Mirrors book.
Thank you very much. I fully agree on the Pale King as well.
I think that's probably my favorite just set piece, like one-on-one fight I've written so far. And then I would say that in terms of giant, messy fights, the Winter Ball is my favorite so far. Thanks for the question.
All right, from Techmaster, how do you stop power creep?
Oh, I don't. Power creep happens in my books. But in all sincerity, I do have a sort of cap for the maximum power level of people in my setting. And so power creep only really happens up to the point where people approach that cap. And so I suppose it depends on how you interpret power creep. From an in-world standpoint, things look sort of like power creep as you unveil more of the characters and areas and things like that exist in the world. At this point in time, you've seen enough of the scope of how strong characters get that there won't be too much more of that. But I do think that it is valuable to some degree to continue being able to introduce things that are threats to, say, characters like Karis, for example, in spite of the fact that in the War of Broken Mirrors, there were not a lot of characters that were overtly more powerful than Karis, except for the people who are like Vacas and things like that. So it's sort of power creep in that I am continuously introducing new characters that could look like, the next Dragon Ball style opponent. But it's been pre-planned, and I do know where the power limits are. So I can sort things in a way that I think feel hopefully coherent to readers and not like I'm breaking my established rules. As long as things come across as being consistent with the rules that I've already put in place with my previous books, I don't think that things that come across as power creep are necessarily a problem. But it just depends on how you interpret the term power creep, etc. Anyway, great question. Sarah Lynn has some really interesting discussion about power creep. If you read through her Reddit posts and such on that subject, she has some really interesting insights on power creep. I'm going to pull up the next person.
Ooh, I just wanted to interject here. It looks like we're falling a bit behind on the text chat questions, so it might be good to do more text chat questions than the live chat questions in terms of like question balance.
Got it. I will do
That's
this
fine.
next live one, and then we will do more in text chat.
All right, I'll jump to doing. How far back are we? That's a lot. Maybe 5.
Yeah, let Human USB here ask their question.
Sure thing. So you as an author have grown significantly from some of your first books to now. Which books would you love to rewrite and have like a V2, V3 republished? Because you're probably a perfectionist and always want to keep touching on that painting.
Yeah, and it's dangerous because I could be doing that forever. I think all the time about Forging Divinity and Sufficiently Advanced Magic in specific. Sufficiently Advanced Magic is still my most popular book, but there are very specific things in Sufficiently Advanced Magic that I could have done better, that I would like to touch up at some point. Specifically, there are some problems with Corin's depiction where early on in the book, when he's going through the spire or whatnot, he seems to have a pretty solid understanding of the magic and how things work. Then when he gets to the school, he comes across like he's never heard of a bunch of things before. This is because originally this was supposed to have an obvious frame story where Corrin is telling the story to Karis, and Corrin is telling Karis about a bunch of local magic stuff that Karis is not familiar with. Unfortunately, the way that I reframed the story did not make it clear that he was telling this story to Karis, and then he seemed like he was learning a bunch of things that should be very obvious to him. If I was going to redo Sufficiently Advanced Magic, I would make it clear what Corrin already knows and what Corrin does not know. Forging Divinity, I would gut that sucker. I would tear Forging Divinity apart. That would be probably more, I'm not going to say a complete rewrite, but I would add a whole bunch of chapters, I would tear whole chapters out, etc. Whereas with Sufficiently Advanced Magic, I think that there's just some tweaking I would need to do here and there. Good question.
All right.
I'll take these questions, like the next few of these, and then I'm going to go hydrate again, and I'll take a brief break.
Okay. From Glarung, do you have a character that's going to be introduced in Soulbrand that you've been excited for us to meet?
Oh, yeah, several actually, but saying who I'm talking about is spoilers. I'm trying to think if there's anything vague I can tell you. Give me a moment. No, I'm going to be waiting around thinking about how to phrase this, and I'm just going to say yes. There are some really interesting characters in Soulbrand, some of which are very plot significant for the long-term series as a whole.
From Cryptid, are you having a good day?
I am, thank you, Cryptid. I hope you're having a good day too.
From Overstarched, Karis versus Goku. Who would win?
Karis could beat Goku at the beginning of Dragon Ball, like the original Dragon Ball. Beyond that, Karis pretty much gets trounced. Okay, so I could get more complicated with this, but by Dragon Ball Z, I would say that even like the Arcane Ascension Karis would have a very, very difficult time. The only chance that Karis would really have, which is actually fairly plausible, is if Goku stood there and let Karis hit him once or twice. A Karis who was taking the fight seriously and a Goku who wasn't, Karis might actually be able to win that fight if Karis, was using the Wind Breaker and taking the fight seriously. But with Dragon Ball characters, they get so fast that even Arcane Ascension Karis is not moving anywhere close to a Dragon Ball Goku or Dragon Ball Z Goku, who is basically moving at the speed of light. Or faster than the speed of light later in the series. And then, eventually Goku gets into like punching out galaxies and that sort of thing. Karis is not there and probably will never reach that kind of ridiculousness.
All right. From Subject 1337, can you give us some secrets about your infamous isekai protocols?
I have certain things that are set up in my setting for voice activation. Under the conditions that I arrive in that setting, I can use a series of voice commands to basically give myself administrator access to my own universe.
Ridiculous.
You gotta do these things.
Okay. Oh, that was already answered. Okay. From Zig, when will we get to see some of those juicy Deep Dominion runes you've been hiding?
Well, Zig, person who would know what these look like already, I would be comfortable with releasing those Deep Dominion runes soon. I actually don't have a huge reason to hold them back at this point, so maybe after this conversation, we'll chat about that at some point and figure out a good plan for deploying those.
For spontaneous rune reveals, blame the tabletop group for not having an enchanter.
Party that doesn't have an enchanter for this setting? That's just... Anyway, all right, go ahead and ask your question.
They didn't have a healer either.
Wow.
It was bad.
Yeah, that sounds like... But hey, that's tabletop for you. I mean, obviously, our tabletops have been a huge
Both
mess.
issues came up at the exact same time when they scratched out a random rune on an enchantment.
Oh, no. Well, I hope some of them survived.
They all did, barely, but only because of your power growth in stressful situations rule.
I got it. That's a great rule. Okay, ask one more question, and then I'm going to take a brief break.
I'm scrolling through. There, a lot of the ones that got asked before are being reposted for easy finding. Go ahead and take your break now while I look for the next question.
I'll go back in a minute.
And located. Okay. I am actually going to take a break myself to refill my glass of water. So I will be right back as well. I'm sorry for the silence.
I can't believe Kester isn't drinking whiskey. Normally he drinks whiskey for these things, if you've listened to the past two. And then he teases decent about it. Which is always hilarious.
Our party got together, and we were climbing the Tiger Spire. And one of our party members is only 15. And they decided that, it was a good idea to scratch out the runes of a freaking, explodey laser thing, and then almost killed me and 2 other people, but mostly me.
Well, it still goes back to the fact that you guys, didn't actually choose any vendors or enchanters for your party.
We didn't. But
that
no,
is
actually,
that is correct. There was 3 people. 3 people picked their attunement and did not pick any of those attunements, and 3 people took a live judgment.
And that's why we didn't get healers.
And they got what they earned based on how judgments work.
I knew I wasn't going to get a healer, but I am a healer now. That's all that matters. It's fine.
Well, you just got it. You're more like an automatic Band-Aid dispenser at this point.
I am. Yes.
You're like a healing rock.
I am a healing rock. Oh my god, just hold me and I'll heal you.
You still don't have an enchanter, though.
Yeah, no, we're not getting an enchanter, probably.
I think Kotetsu is reading about runes.
Oh god.
What?
Yes, Kotetsu is reading about runes, and that terrifies me. A lot.
I'm an
Also,
enchanter now, guys. He's read one book.
54, I will hug you to heal you.
It's true. It is. You're not going to be able to manipulate anything or create your own magic items, but with what Kotetsu has been researching, you are no longer in danger of accidentally blowing yourself up.
This is true.
If you blow yourself up, it is going to be a direct result of choices made.
That will
so
never
then you
happen
can't blame
again.
anybody but yourselves.
It almost happened, actually, now that I think about it. Didn't we almost do that when we committed accidental regicide? Didn't we almost take off the runes of the tree?
You did.
We did?
Yeah, that's the
that was the puzzle that we oversaw.
So a little bit of insight to how runes work in a ritual setting setup is you started the process of correctly disarming the runes and then never finished.
Oh.
Way to go, guys. Good job.
We would do.
So once you disabled a single rune, the others started building up like a backlog of energy, and you never went to disable those runes. So after a certain amount of time, they destabilize, and the ritual or enchantment detonates anyway. So what you did is with the when you did the tree thing was rather than scratching a rune and blowing everything up, you more put a fuse on the ritual. And that was the burst of anti-travel dominion.
Yeah, that was bad.
I give Corin a very hard time for how he handles situations, but listening to this, maybe you should have that honor. I'm kidding.
Yeah, we really should. Yeah, it was bad. We're also we completely overthought the puzzle. There was no reason why we did what we did. There was no reason, but we did it anyway. And I'm still so mad about it.
We only accidentally killed 3 people. It could have been worse.
We did. It could
All
have
right,
been worse.
I am back now. You guys are welcome to keep chatting for a bit if you'd like, but I am here.
As entertaining as we are, that's not the purpose of this
True.
Q&A.
Well, that's fine. I am trying to get some other people to come and chat, but we'll see if it happens.
Okay. So, starting back up from Laura, does Reika have access to a non-standard dominion, say the Dominion of Blankets?
She does now, and Reika is actually somebody who I've been trying to get out here, but unfortunately, Reika is working right now, so we'll see if we can get a Reika at some point, but I don't think we'll have Reika today. But yes, I will inform Reika that Reika now has the Dominion of Blankets.
All right. And there we go.
We do have somebody up for a request to speak, so I'm going to pull them in real quick while you search.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there. Love the books. I just realized you were doing a voice chat today. This may have already been asked, but are you working on the 4th Arcane book already, or where are you at with?
Well, that's a really good question. I have already started doing some writing for the 4th Arcane Ascension book, but I've also started on a whole bunch of other projects too. I will not start on the 4th Arcane Ascension book in earnest until after Soulbrand launches. So we've probably got, let's say, a little bit over a month, probably, depending on how things go with beta and editing and such, before I really start to work heavily on AA4.
That is amazing. Only a month. I'm actually a big Butcher fan, and I've kind of come to your work recently. So keep it up. I can't wait till you release on Audible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. From the accident, could a sufficiently advanced, determined, and evil summoner make a contract with a Vec?
Yes, absolutely. With caveats, there are specific prerequisites for making a contract with virtually anything. The VEC would have to do some things in order to make that work, but certain VEC could absolutely be convinced to do that. Hopefully we'll never see that happen in World, but you might, and it would be terrifying.
All right, from Scopats of the Old Guard, is Ro role-playing my old DM right now?
That's pretty funny. Yeah. Yes, I am.
From Godawful Ninja, any plans on writing any more spin-offs like Weapon and Wielders with characters from Arcane Ascension?
Yes, definitely. I have already mentioned that I'm going to do a Rin Jaden story at some point. There is a Sarah Cadence story that I may or may not finish, and then there will probably be some other ones.
From Glaurung, why is Soulbrand not a Flamberge?
That's a really interesting question. So yes, that would be very thematically appropriate. The swords were picked basically around what physical swords specific people wanted to wield for live action stuff, or what I found would be appropriate for specific people to be wielding in that context. So if we had more lark Flamberges running around, then that probably would have been the direction we went. But now this was a decision made largely out of practicality.
And last one before we grab somebody else to ask a question from Laura. Are any of the 6 sacred swords spears?
No, but there is something that is a spear that is similar. So I'm going to try not to spoil too much about that, but there are non-sword weapons that are analogous to the 6 sacred swords.
That's a fair answer. I would say yes, actually. I mean, just because diamantine could be a spear.
Sure. So some of the weapons can change in shape, but diamantine still has a base form of being a Dao.
All right. Is there anybody waiting for a question?
Yes, there is. There's one person, so I will pull them in.
All right.
Buddy, thank you again. So in the D&D universe, we have like the 5e player handbook, the dungeon guide master manual, or monster manual. Do you plan on publishing anything like that so people can roleplay or do a tabletop universe based upon your rules, or would publishing that spoil a lot of the work you already have going and we got to wait a couple years for those to come out?
So the main problem at this point, well, two main problems with publishing that. One is time. I just have to have the amount of time necessary to finish writing one of those things up. So to give you an idea of what I've already worked on, there is a standalone tabletop game rules system, which Kester's already seen, I've already played with, it's usable. And there is also a Pathfinder campaign setting book. So similar to what you'd see for like a classic Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting book for something like Ravenloft or the Forgotten Realms or something like that. Neither of those is publishable right now, both because they're not finished and because of publisher stuff, meaning that there is some ambiguity in whether or not I have the ability to publish those on my own at this point, or if a publisher has the rights to be publishing them, and that the logistics of dealing with the intellectual property for that and all that mess is another thing that is putting it on hold. I am not super worried about spoiling too much of the setting with these books because I can curate what goes into them, as long as I'm the one who's actually physically writing the content, which I am for the ones that I'm working on right now. If somebody else was doing it, which is also a possibility at some point in the future, I would have to very carefully go over those and make sure that they don't release things that are huge spoilers for future books. I think it is valuable to provide to readers additional information beyond what is in the current books, things that will allow you to run campaigns more easily, but there's a fine line between that and spoilers. So I definitely would have to be careful about that, but I do want to get you tabletop role-playing game books at some point in time. Just a matter of when.
Cool, thank you. Also, one last comment, more Demon King. That's how I found you, and I absolutely love that series.
I would love to do more Demon King or more Demon King-like stuff at some point in the future. Part of that is that Demon King as an IP, I own some of it, and some of it is controlled by Audible, who is my publisher for it. And basically, I need to find the right time to work with them on that. It's more complicated than just writing more Arcane Ascension content. That said, I do either plan to do more Demon King stuff eventually when I have time and when Audible is interested, or I will do something else that is similar to but not identical to Demon King in another setting at some point.
All right. From Subject 1337, who is your favorite out of Corin's party?
I mean, Patrick, obviously. Is that even a question? Patrick should be everyone's favorite.
All right. From Sterling, will Mara be the true savior of the world?
I actually have to hesitate to answer that question. So I'm going to try not to give a non-answer here. There is no one true savior of the world. That said, Mara is the closest thing in this story to a farm girl hero character that is the traditional standard fantasy chosen one figure. I was very deliberate about not making Corin that character, but Mara, if you look at the types of tropes that she is drawing from in her archetype, she is basically that character. Now, that being said, doesn't mean that I'm not going to subvert certain things. There are elements where she is going to deviate from your standard character, but Mara will be a hero.
All right. From Sterling, how are we supposed to be sus of all the S name people when so many people have S names?
I don't know. You're going to have to ask Solaris about that one.
From Starscorn, we've asked before which characters you could beat in a fist fight. So, which characters would you want to fist fight, regardless of if you could beat them or not? And why is the answer Magnus Cadence?
Yeah, I was gonna say Magnus Cadence. So this one isn't even a railroading me thing. He's a child abuser. I mean, it's as simple as that. Magnus Cadence is a horrible person. If I could punch Magnus Cadence, then I would punch Magnus Cadence.
From AstroTurf, are there canonically or quasi-canonically alternate attunements based on the same Deep Dominion as currently available ones, designed with a completely different tool set and intended combat/utility approach?
More or less, yes.
All right. From Sabrina, do you have any plans to have media of different formats, webcomic, animated shows, other than novels?
Yes, 100% definitely. I was hoping that we could have an announcement about something like that very soon. I don't know if that's still going to happen, but yes, at some point in time there will be a thing, or hopefully several things. But yeah, plans.
All right. Is there anybody waiting to ask a question?
I'm going to pull someone in for chat.
Okay.
Howdy, it's me again. So, we've seen that attunements have gone through multiple versions, and they're always evolving, even on the own person
I'm not getting any
themselves.
sound from you.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Ooh, it's possible that's on my end. I'm not getting any sound from Castor either. Castor, are you saying anything?
I am saying things, yes.
Oh no, it seems my sound is broken. I will be back.
Oh no. I killed him.
Well, hey, human, got any questions for me?
All right. Testing.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I guess I was just broken for a minute there. Human, you want to go ahead and ask my question now?
Yeah. Thank you. So, are we going to get any kind of backstory on how attunements have evolved over time? How there's been obvious, like version 1, version 2, 1.1, etc.? Because that's incredibly fascinating. It's almost like the world you're describing is like a video game in of itself, and someone is tinkering with everything.
You will get more information about that in future books.
I love the vagueness. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. From Carlo, speaking of Sarah Shard / Cadence, not so much a question, but something that I'd like to let you know. I'm gender fluid and have actually been considering choosing Shard as my new name, mostly because I like the sound of it in your book and decided to try it for myself. Would that be okay with you?
Absolutely. I am honored. Thank you so much. Please feel free to do so. Thank you. I'm honored.
From Terrible, you've mentioned Karis knows some grappling. Does he hit takedowns, or is he a filthy guard puller?
That's really hilarious. I don't have a canonical answer to that. So his grappling style would too heavily incorporate magic for me to give him any kind of conventional grappling style. So that's a cheating answer. But yeah, he would do terrible things. And we have another person who wants to talk, so I'll bring them.
Okay.
Hello. Sorry about background noise. I am Kotai. For my question, we have heard of students reaching far past what Corin and the gang have gotten in the book. How many of them would end up becoming or sliding into the plot? For example, the group that managed to take out Simulacra.
Yeah, you'll see some of those in A4. There are some heavy hitters in there, and you'll get some context as to why some people could be way ahead of Corin and Co. That being said, people are not necessarily as far of Corin and Co. After the end of A2 and A3 as your average person may think, or as Corin may think. Corin has a inflated view of others to some degree and a deflated view of himself. He does not have a realistic idea of where averages are. Part of that is because of his father, and part of that is because of the school system. Corin's grades do not accurately represent where Corin actually stands in terms of overall, say, combat performance compared to your average student. He is not the absolute top person in terms of like a straight fight, but he is much better than his numbers would represent.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right. From Laura, if there is a dominion of time, what sorts of butterfly effects would happen when you manipulate it regarding interactions with other types of essence? If there is not a dominion of time, we live in a simulation. Am I wrong?
That's hilarious. There are reasons that things could exist without being a simulation. So dominions are terms that humans use to understand concepts that are not so easily described in a single word. There is something that is called the dominion of time. Whether or not that actually is, say, the source of time or the governor for time within that setting, that is a huge metaphysical discussion that is I could ramble about for a very long time. But the bottom line here is that you should not take the names of dominions as meaning that they are the sole source or sole representation of that concept, nor even that they are necessarily accurate. For that reason, you will see things like dominion names being used differently in different cultures. The dominion of stability is referred to as enhancement on Kaldwin, for example. Or the dominion of motion is referred to as transference. These are different understandings of the same core concepts. And so, yes, there is something that is called the dominion of time. But whether or not that is an accurate assessment of what it is, that's a little bit more open-ended. As for butterfly effects, I'm going to say read and find out, because time magic is something that is very important to some of the upcoming story content, and I do not want to give away anything ahead of time about how that works.
Also from Laura, is there a smidgen of a chance we may get a cameo of one of the canon characters in RP? I think that's directed at me. The closest thing to that I can say is I've talked to Dyson about coming in as a character and like joining in with Dyson. But
I'd
other
like
than
to
that,
interject on that. So I'm one of the, I'm not only a Whisper, but I'm also one of the RP mods, and there is a rule, in case anybody was wondering, that we do not have canon characters show up in any shape or form in the RP. The TTRPG is a totally different thing, and that's Kester's domain. But within the RP, no canon characters. Sorry about that.
Thank you for that interjection, and it is useful, and I generally agree with it. I don't think that other people should be bringing in those canon characters. I don't think I should be bringing in those canon characters either. I have considered showing up in people's RP stuff, and it would be fun for me to like show up at somebody's winter ball or whatever, but it would also be stealing the show in a way that is completely unfair to everyone else. So if there is a format where I can do that type of thing without spoiling the experience for people, great. Maybe I will host something that is a separate RP where I run something, I'll live stream for Caster or something like that at some point. But I'm not going to be jumping into the general RP, because there's nothing worse than having an author show up and ruin everybody's day by bringing in their crazy canon character and that sort of thing. So that's my take on the subject. I don't want to spoil everybody else's fun.
all right. From Nyanper, sorry if I came across badly when I asked my first question. I'm not good at talking to people. Where's Chapter 2 of the Dragon Ball Z and Cradle crossover fanfiction?
First off, you're amazing, and that's a fantastic question. I will probably not do another April Fool's Day Cradle Dragon Ball crossover fic. Sorry, the spoilers for later Cradle books, but the event that I depicted in my fanfic has been depicted differently now in Will White's actual books, thus spoiling my fanfic. So I don't think that I can continue to pursue that fanfic. That being said, I have come up with other April Fool's stuff that I could do at some point in the future. I've even considered some other Cradle stuff. There was a point in time where I considered having Karis and Reika showing up at the wrong tournament, for example, and writing a section where they were going through all of the tournament events for Will White's tournament in the last few books. I think that I kind of missed my window of time to do that, but those are the types of things that I think about doing on occasion.
From Orthis, what's the deal with certain dominions being relatively rare or even legendary in War of Broken Mirrors, but common in the sense that they are active attunements in the Arcane Ascension timeline, i.e. Void being extremely rare in War of Broken Mirrors, but Shadows don't seem very special in their rarity in Caldwin?
So, excellent question. In the War of Broken Mirrors series, people's magic is generally based on what they're born with. And humans and Rethri, which are the primary species that are depicted in the War of Broken Mirrors, are not frequently born with specific dominions. So things like Void, you don't see it frequently because people are generally not born with connections to the Void Dominion. Whereas attunements, those are assigned to people and they have a rarity based on whatever entity is capable of giving out those attunements. And that does not necessarily correspond to the same rarity level that those attunements would have if people were simply being born with them.
From Zig, similar to the Dragon Ball Z Cradle question, when can we expect the rest of Stab 2?
I don't think I can. Writing that section of Stab 2 is like physically painful for me. It is hilarious, but it is so hard to write in that style. It's, for people who haven't read the Stab 2 thing that's on my blog, it is a parody of like harem self-insert kind of power fantasy fiction. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And even knowing that it is an absolute parody of that kind of thing, I don't think that I can physically make myself write more of it.
All right. If we have somebody waiting, why don't you grab someone to ask a question?
Got a few, actually, so I'm going to go ahead and grab one.
Hello. Hi, Lauren here. I
Hello.
wanted to ask. I wanted to ask which Dominion sorcery do you find the most difficult to write in battle sequences?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I have a lot of trouble writing chaos, which Castor is going to find funny because chaos is like Castor's thing. But it's difficult to depict chaos in ways that make it distinct from just either traditional blasty stuff, like your traditional fire sorcery or things like that, or more general random events occurring. And so my version of chaos magic isn't probability manipulation in the way that it is in certain other settings. And so finding the right way to depict chaos so that it is interesting but accurate to how it should work in setting is very, very difficult. Good question.
All right. First of all, I have notes. Beyond that, next up from Kotai, what are the names of the religions that we have heard already?
Let's see, you've seen aspectists, you've seen pantheonists, you have seen Teos practitioners. Trying to think of other ones that you've seen. There's a third one.
I was going to say a good one is there is a confusion based on what was in the books about Valian's religion, whether it's the Liadrin or the Kessite religion.
Different terms for the same thing. Liadra is the name of a location, So when people are saying the Liadrin faith, they are saying the faith that is related to that specific region of the map, which is where it is practiced. Kessite means that you worship the Vekes.
All right. From Orthus, how much of Sterling's dossier in stealing sorcery was true? For instance, it was stated that he was a member of the Haven Knights, which seems related to Iara.
It is, but most of his background was not true. I'm not going to say exactly how much because Sterling could still be relevant in the future.
From Cryptid, why did you eat Leo for lunch? For context, Cryptid's tabletop RPG character's full name is Leo Fettuccini Risotto Carbonara Leovani.
Your tabletop character was delicious, thank you.
From Samix, what is the hardest challenge of telling a wuxia story to a Western audience?
I'm not even qualified to answer that question. I'm not even qualified to pronounce wuxia correctly. So I would say that none of my current stories even fall into that category. My Artinian novel probably will. It'll probably be wuxia or xianxia, which I'm also probably pronouncing wrong. But it actually probably wouldn't even be either of those because I'm not using Taoism. So I would say that there are certain specific tropes that I have to be aware of. There are certain traits of those stories that I have to pick and choose carefully in order to adopt those or translate them to being setting appropriate. Because, for example, a lot of the things that are in xianxia or cultivation novels are based specifically on Taoist religious principles. And I'm not going to bring a real world religion directly into my setting. So I have to figure out how much of that I can adapt in ways that are appropriate for bringing it into my story universe and being respectful. So that's a huge challenge. And then figuring out how to balance that sort of stuff with the existing magic systems and existing character archetypes, etc. I would consider most of my own existing stuff to be more representative, more similar to Japanese role-playing games or to shonen battle manga rather than being wuxia or xianxia. A lot of similarities there. But at least with the Japanese stuff, I have a better understanding of it, both due to many, many years of exposure and that I've actually taken Japanese language classes and Japanese religion classes and things like that. So I'm a little bit more comfortable with it because I've actually studied it to some degree. I'm no expert, don't get me wrong. But with the Chinese stuff, I do not have anywhere near the level of context that I do with the Japanese stuff. So I will have to do more research if I want to depict any of that stuff correctly. But for the most part, I'm going to be dodging the answer to some degree because I would not say that any of my current books actually fall into that category.
From Feels No Joy, how rare is a situation like Tristan's, where the world presumes them dead, but they're actually kept in the tower as a whisper?
Answering the frequency of Tristan's situation would be a tremendous spoiler for how that stuff works. So I'm going to be, I'm going to not answer that. You'll have to find out in future books. Sorry.
All right. And if somebody's waiting, why don't you grab some
we've got
a question?
I'm going to go ahead and grab one.
Hello. My name is Head Trauma, and I wanted to ask if there are non-binary or gender non-conforming dorms at Lorien Heights.
Oh, that's a phenomenal question. And I'm going to be honest, I had not even considered it.
Credit to Cryptid on that one.
It's a really good question. So there should be, because followers of WID are reasonably common. I would say that they have not been addressed in story yet because while followers of WID or other non-binary characters that are outside of that framework exist, they are not in a large enough population that they would have dorms that Corin is aware about. So either they would be sorted temporarily according to their current preferred gender preference, which is understandable in setting. People would accept that. Or there would probably be a small dorm area for people who are strictly non-binary in a either still figuring it out sense or prefer to be changing relatively rapidly sense, or agender folks or that sort of thing. They would probably have their own small dorm area. That being said, this is spur of the moment answer. I don't have anything written into the setting for that yet, but my gut instinct is those absolutely should exist, and you can just assume that Corin hasn't heard about them.
Thank you so much. That's a great answer.
For asking.
All right. From Cryptid, how tall is Derek?
I don't know, somewhere between cheesecake and hunk, I would say. If you're looking for numbers, like, I don't think I can give you those.
From Chaotic, at the start of Weapon and Wielders Book 1, Karis seemed to think on what Ray and Dawn would have thought of the students. What other character interactions would be interesting to see between the Weapon and Wielders War of Broken Mirrors books and the Arcane Ascension books?
Oh, there's tons of fun, like, potential for that sort of thing. So, in Dawn's case, Dawn would be very happy to have any kind of contact with non-human entities, like, say, Vendria's Crystal or the Wandering War, or that sort of thing. Dawn would find that fascinating and also probably feel a little bit less lonely having contact with characters like that. Researcher and Dawn would get along great. They would have a phenomenal relationship. So those would be really interesting to see. I frequently think about how well Reika would get along with Mara. I think that seeing the two of them together at some point would have been fantastic. Yeah, aside from that, seeing Reika and Velis together would be very interesting. That would be an interesting thing, and possibly very dangerous. So that's another fun one. I think I'll stop there, but there's lots of possibilities there. Also, Patrick would just be last one. Patrick would be just absolutely like in love with both Dawn and Reika. Like Patrick would just be just so happy to meet them.
From Decent, about how tall is Corin?
If you're going to make me start giving canonical answers to this stuff, I'm going to say that I would prefer to keep these things flexible so that people can project on the characters more easily, and that it is easier to do fan art and things like that. So I'm going to give you some non-canon answers on Corin and Derek. My non-canon answer for Corin is that I would put him at probably around 5'7", 5'8", something like that. Derek is probably just a little bit taller than that. He's probably around 5'10", somewhere in that range. Yeah, I'll stick with just those for the moment. But those are some gut answers that are non-canon answers.
Well, you have just made the tiny Corin cult very happy.
He's not super short, but he is probably just slightly below average. And it depends on your culture, too. That is slightly below average for standard American statistics. In other countries, it would actually be different.
All right. From Herald of Chaos. Rin kept a number of powerful and dangerous items in her box, but in this series it's clear that knowledge is the ultimate power in the universe. So why aren't there any books stored in her box? Surely she must have encountered a number of dangerous texts and tomes that would be best removed from public consumption. Even the Thornguard and Paladins are very careful to keep certain knowledge restricted.
Rin has a very different philosophy about the spread of knowledge than people like the Thornguard or even the Paladins. The fact that she does not have books that she is hoarding actually is fairly telling about that. She is very well read, but she does not need to hoard those books. And keeping knowledge away from others is not something that she would necessarily philosophically agree with.
From Laura, what would you say is the ratio of questions answered to questions brought up in Swolebrand?
I don't have a good answer to that because people are going to interpret that differently. So a lot of the answers that people are going to be getting in that book are incomplete. And that's actually really representative of how I tend to handle these things in general. I tend to tease out information very gradually over time, but you will get clear answers to a few things, and there will be more questions on some other subjects. As for a specific ratio, I'm not going to give you one because it's kind of an exercise in futility.
All right. Questions.
I'll pull one person in real quick while you're juggling, and then after that, I'm going to take another break.
All right.
Hello, it's me again. I have a question about. We've seen a lot of magic items that are pretty strictly melee weapons, but noting that I haven't read Arcane Ascension 3 yet, are there any legendary magic bows in Cauldron or Mithralis, or maybe even some magical firearms on Cauldron that are getting some high notoriety? And alongside that, why would one of them have the ability to shapeshift into a sword?
Good question. There are definitely going to be, in some of the future books, legendary ranged weapons. I won't say which books they're in because I don't want to spoil things. There are a number of shape-shifting weapons in the setting in general. Usually it is for intelligent weapons that have gained the ability to change their own shape based on those circumstances. In certain other cases, you might have weapons that simply have the ability to transform based on specific commands by their user. So that are weapons that are designed for being usable in a wide variety of different circumstances. So yeah, you got some other items like that to look forward to. I think you're still primarily going to see melee weapons for the next few books, but there are some powerful ranged ones that are showing up soon too.
All right. Yeah, I guess that's it. I'll wait later. Bye.
Thanks for your question. I'm going to take a quick break. I will be back in a couple minutes.
All right. Let's see. From stuff from the LARP, I didn't really have any legendary ranged weapons, but Kester did develop his high explosive anti-kaiju rounds to use in his guns. So that's something. Anyway. I'm alone in here. Somebody else jump back in.
Okay, I can jump in.
TTRPG story time?
Oh dear. Is that what's happening?
I don't know. I saw Lan join, and
oh gosh,
Lan played the character that tried to kill us. So
okay. Well, so a little bit of context and story for those of you that are listening.
Oh,
so
before you say that, I just wanted to ask: are we allowed to talk about where the beginning part of the TTRPG is set because of AA3? Is that like a spoiler if we talk about what happens? I don't know.
Don't talk about anything happening in Arcane Ascension 3.
But like just like the general makeup of the Spire and like what we did is fine.
We're in an alternate universe canon, so what we're talking about doesn't really affect
I'm just more
the
talking
AA3.
about like the specifics of why the Tiger Spire is like different than the other ones.
Oh, no,
Are we
I'm
allowed
not gonna...
to talk about that?
I've said stuff about that before in the Discord, but because of the nature of the book release and the audio release and stuff, let's not mention anything like that and just leave it for the book.
Yeah.
Cool.
So our group was climbing through the Tiger Spire, and we run into a room that has a multi-damage affinity barrier effectively, where it's like one of those light barriers where you're supposed to pass through it, and depending on what color light it is, that's what type of damage you're supposed to be taking. And my character is the person that's supposed to disarm traps, because for those of you that don't know, the Tiger Spire is associated with having a lot of traps. Now, me being the person that's supposed to disarm things, I'm looking at this thing and I'm realizing that it's an enchantment. And I have no idea in character how to disarm an enchantment.
So he blows this up.
So I back up, and my character has the ability to remotely control small, lightweight objects. So I go back
Context,
to the...
he's a wayfarer.
Yeah, my character's a wayfarer. And so using air mana, effectively, I'm controlling Chisel, and I scratch out one of the runes. And you know how Corin mentions that, like, blowing up enchantments the wrong way can have disastrous effects? Well, our 4 out of 6 characters managed to experience that. It was unexpected.
Very stressful.
Yeah, and as a result, my character, who's a 15-year-old coming from Dalanos, was the only one wearing full plate armor, and thus was the only one with enough defenses to stay conscious through the ritual explosion, or enchantment explosion. It is, yeah, don't mess with runes.
Never
is
again.
Yeah, well, okay. Ironically, we messed with runes again.
But it was successful. Well, no, it wasn't. But
No, we basically blew up an entire tree, and I've actually commissioned art of that tree.
yay!
That
So
will
excited for the tree.
I will say that in the rune scratch out event, that there were a lot of runes, and they were arranged in a very specific way. And I thought that there might be enough context clues by how the runes were arranged to give them a good chance of picking the right one to, at the very least, be able to get through the effect and to a place of safety before anything bad happened. But they picked, but Kotetsu picked specifically a capacity rune to rupture.
Because not everyone studies up on how runes look, and therefore, if you don't study up on what symbols mean what, like I believe, what's his name in On the Shoulders of Titans? Vyers, I believe. Vyers actually studied runes, even though he is a shaper. Now, if my character had done that, I would have actually had a chance of figuring out which ones I could safely mess with.
I feel like in character, the most likely to have like had access to study runes and stuff would have been my character, because I'm the only Valian one. So I'm the only one that like was in a school that had enchanters in it, but I didn't do anything with that. So
Yep. Meanwhile,
I'm also a summoner, so
To be fair, Cryptid, you were very overwhelmed with the whole like picking lores part of character creation.
yeah, I only have like maybe 4 in total.
Whereas my character, he is a bookworm. You put him in a library, he is happy as a clam. I think I've given Kester some mild headaches in the number of lore requests I've made.
I am very happy that the next game is the cutoff for respecking characters.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and interject here. I do love hearing tabletop story time, but I'm back, and we should probably hold some more questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. From Demon, how do you balance working on the expansive world system and working on plot? You seem to have a ton of pre-existing notes, but with things like attunements and other specifics, you seem to be working it out as you go. It seems like you have to juggle between all the different elements that go into this world.
Not as much as you might think. I have all of the attunements, for example. I've had them for years. I didn't have all of the attunements when I wrote the first Arcane Ascension book, but I think I had the full list before I wrote AA2. I should amend that and say the full list of standard attunements that are given out by the spires. There are other attunements, like, say, Sarah's Invoker attunement, that are outside of the standard framework that I did not have all of them established that early. That being said, I still do spend a considerable amount of time on world building, but I haven't had to in a while. Most of my recent world building was for, say, things like how to defeat a Demon King, because that's in a completely different setting. I will have to do more world building again when I get more into Carefully Worded Wishes, which is Rin's book, or when I get into things on other continents. But essentially, that's actually a good summary of how I do it. I do a bunch of world building for any given continent if I have not already done it for that continent. And then I'm pretty much set at that point. I do flesh certain things out as I go, like, say, specific cities, for example. I will put in more detail on that, or new factions and organizations as the story progresses. But that's not actually all that time-consuming compared to the initial work that's done. The first thing that I do for a continent is that I will do what I call a regional guide. And that is something that's about 20,000 words or so, depending on the specific region, of just information about, like, these are the local religions, these are the local things that people worship, this is how the local magic system works, these are various different items, these are some of their legends, some of their holidays. I'll come up with 2 or 3 new calendar systems so that Zig will get angry at me, that sort of thing. So I flesh out a lot of that early stuff in advance. Oh, monsters too, all the different species that are available on that continent, that sort of thing. And then from there, I basically have enough to get into writing the first book or 2 in that specific setting. I will add little things. I will make new maps and things like that as I go. So one of the things that I frequently do is anytime I'm doing a dungeon crawl, like a spire climb or that sort of thing, I will create a dungeon map. And those have not been released with the stuff, but I make them for myself. And so whenever people are going to go into a specific room, I'll have that room in advance, and that makes it a lot easier for me. I would say that one of the things that's really helpful to me is that when I do run things like the tabletop games or things like that, I will do a lot of my world building stuff for those, and then I don't have to do that as a redundant thing when I'm actually doing the books. And so it's a useful exercise. I will either do that stuff in advance, or when I get questions, when Kester asks me for a lore document on a specific subject, I will often write a lore document, and then I will have that ready for when I'm working on a book later. So yeah, long-winded answer, but there you go.
All right, from Decent, in a previous Q&A, you mentioned that people who eat cold pizza are monsters. Why do you think that about us?
I am being facetious when I say things like that. It is an affectionate form of trolling. That being said, I don't think that cold pizza tastes as good as warm pizza, and thus you are a monster.
From Amy, might we get more info about the runes that are on the Jaden box?
That's harder. You will in certain future books, but in terms of things like what they're going to look like, I need to actually make those runes. I haven't yet, or at least not all of them. And I don't want them to visually look like the same runes that I've already been doing for other things. So either I need to have a other artist do it, or I needed to figure out what system I personally am going to be doing for the Artinian language runes that would be used on it. And I'm not sure how I'm going to approach that yet.
From Ominous Toe, what would be the cost of using lightning sorcery? Sorry if it was in the books and I missed it.
I don't think you did. I don't think I've given that yet. From a practical standpoint, I would say that the way that you would probably interpret that is disrupting the user's nervous system. And so overusing lightning sorcery would mean that you might have delayed reactions to things or otherwise have issues with your nervous system not processing things properly.
From DB3131, do you have any updates that you can give for progress on works in progress, both Soulbrand, future Arcane Ascension books, spin-offs, or non-Ascension universe works?
Yeah, I think I can tell you that for Soulbrand is in beta reading right now. So my first set of people are already reading it. It is very, very long. So it's taking some people a while. Some people have already finished it, which is fantastic. I'm getting lots of excellent notes and making changes based on those notes. In terms of other stuff, I have already started on Arcane Ascension 4, but I'm not going to give you a lot of details on that. I have already started on Weapons and Wielders 4 as well. In Weapons and Wielders 4's case, the only thing that I've done is recap stuff. So writing the recap chapters and things like that, and appendices and that sort of thing. None of the actual content. Carefully Worded Wishes has a fair bit of content and has for a while, but I'm not going to be working on it anytime in the near future. I have dabbled with the idea of getting another writer to finish Carefully Worded Wishes so that we can get it out sooner. I don't know if I'm going to end up doing that or finishing it myself. We'll see. In terms of other projects, almost everything else is basically a secret project at this point. So I don't think I can reveal anything else about that. There are other books that are in progress, but nothing. I don't think there's anything else I can talk about.
All right, let's grab someone from the audience.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Terrible here again. So, in Arcane Ascension 2, when Karis and Derek are sparring, Karis mentions that his capacity not to harm involves a considerable degree of outside help, and I think in another Q&A you mentioned that he's operating under restrictions that we're not quite aware of. Is one of those restrictions something similar to Rin Jaden's Worldmaker seal? Because that's the only thing I could think of that is close to constraining something like the Dominion Breaker.
You'll get more information on that subject in Weapons and Wielders 3. You're thinking along some of the right lines, but I don't want to spoil events for Weapons and Wielders 3 for you.
I respect the read and find out. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. From Kotai, we've heard of students reaching far past what Corin and the gang are at in the school. Will any of those characters slide into relevance, or will most of them remain as overachievers in the school? Oh, this was asked live.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly re-answer this. Yes, some of those will come up in the future. Some of them will not, but yeah, some of them will be relevant.
From Sterling, does the Jaden box store items in an extra planner space, classic storage space, or does it store items in its own small plane of existence, a space that's not part of the standard Dominion/core plane?
I'm not going to answer that because it makes certain metaphysics assumptions, and I don't want to get into exactly how it works yet. There will be discussion of how extraplanar spaces and such work at some point in the future.
From DB3131, how does outer space as we think of it in reality compare with your universe, space between worlds and dominions?
I'm getting a lot of read and finding out questions right now, unfortunately, and I hate answering that. But the simple answer is that there is nothing directly analogous to outer space in universe in this setting. There is a separation between the location of habitable planets and things like that, but it is not space as we would call it here. And then there are dominions. They are something different from just being in the same locale in different spatial locations. We will get into that more in the future.
From Orthus, what did you have to give up in order to permanently steal all of Will White's hair?
That's funny, but I'm actually older than Will, so my hair is a pre-existing condition, and I don't know how he lost his. But let's not be mean to poor Will. I'm sure that his hair or hairlessness is a part of his mystique and powerful image.
From Demon, throughout the series, we've seen that there are some really cool things out in the world related to crafting and engineering, and it feels like there are mentions of crafters all the way back to War of Broken Mirrors. But as far as I know, we haven't really met any crafters that were recurring characters.
You will meet some crafters in AA3, and there is a recurring crafter between Weapons and Wielders 2 and Weapons and Wielders 3 as well.
Okay. From Laura, what would be the most efficient method of interstellar travel currently?
The closest equivalent of that at this point in time, from the frame of reference of people from the books that you have currently read, would just be travel sorcery.
From Sterling, have you read The Inheritance Cycle?
No, I have not.
All right, let's grab someone from the audience.
Hello again.
Hello.
So, my question is, when series like Game of Thrones get very popular, we see a sudden surge of babies named Khaleesi or similar. If Arcane Ascension sees that kind of popularity, which character names would be the funniest for people to call their children?
The funniest. Steel, probably, because of the connotations of stab and stab 2. That would be funniest to me. In terms of more esoteric names than Steel, it would be pretty bad if people started naming their kids Magnus because of the Magnus in my setting.
Good point. My personal vote would be for Researcher.
Oh, that would be a really good one. Thank you, Magnus.
Here we go. From Orthus, since Dyson is rude, what are the basic unique attunement functions of the Abjurer?
I don't think Dyson even has that information, and I generally am not going to give out information on the basic attunement functions for attunements that have not been previously disclosed. I will say that it is the banishment-focused attunement, and that banishing things to other locations and restricting their powers is a part of its core functionality. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that because you're going to have to talk to a Abjurer character in a future book to figure out more about how they work.
All right. Grab someone from the audience. There's a whole lot of no questions right here.
Sounds good. I'm grabbing someone now.
Hi. The accident. You mentioned that the Tiger Spire would be the safest. What is the most dangerous spire?
For an ordinary human person like me, the Hydra Spire would probably be the most dangerous. To give you a little more context, the Hydra Spire has a lot of monsters. And so, because it is very combat focused, I would probably just get eaten by something really fast.
Okay, thank you.
From Sterling, how big are Patrick's biceps?
Infinite sized.
Ugh.
Infinity biceps. No, it depends on what point in the series we're talking about, because when he first goes to school, Patrick's a big boy, but he is not particularly athletic. By the end of Arcane Ascension 2, he is in excellent shape and is not just big, he is strong. He is honed himself into being a athletic but still large build. I have not measured Patrick's biceps, but you could say that they would be significant by the end of Arcane Ascension 2.
From Demon, is there another favorite tabletop or LARP that you actively watch or follow? And if so, what makes it interesting to you?
That's a really good question. I don't watch any of the LARP broadcast tabletop broadcast shows or anything along those lines. I'm familiar with things like Critical Role and stuff, but I don't watch them. The closest for me would be reading other books that are loosely based on people's campaigns. So to give you a classic example, Record of Lodos War is a book /anime/manga series that is based on a Dungeons and Dragons style campaign that was run in Japan in the 80s. And there's still new Record of Lodos content coming out. The Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth just came out on Steam recently. And so I would say that I still follow Lodos to the degree that I played Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth. And I enjoyed it. It's a good game. I'd recommend it. Aside from that, I don't really follow a lot of things of that type.
All right. From Equatorial Bacon Strip, hello. Can you describe Dawn's medallions? I'm a student jeweler who specializes in geeky jewelry and want to see if I can make them a reality.
Oh, I would love to. I would say that is something that I don't think that I am qualified to answer in here right now because I don't have descriptions in front of me. But private message me later and we'll discuss it. Something along those lines. I'd like to give you that information and see what you can come up with.
From Bat, is takes after WID or similar WID related the common term for non-binary person? Is there another common term?
No, that is it. That is the common term. I debated having something like Widite or something like that, but that sounds a little bit too much like a slur. So I think takes after Wid is probably a good way of putting it because it comes across as being something that is culturally understood as being taking on the qualities of a deity that everybody worships. Whereas having something that is more shorthand, and maybe this depends on your specific linguistic assumptions, but shortening it struck me as being less respectful. So that's the reason why I used longhand for that instead of a shorthand term.
From Sterling, will normal Corin ever meet Chad Chestmark Corin?
For those of you who are not familiar with the hilarious context here, there was a book trailer for Arcane Ascension that shows a epic picture of a shirtless dude with a enchanter attunement mark, which was a hilarious misinterpretation of some requested artwork. I would love to have a particular chest-marked enchanter that will now be thought of as being the Swole Trailer Corin. Maybe he'll also be named Corin or something analogous to Corin. So look forward to that in the future.
From Herald of Chaos, how is Lorien Heights going to address the problem of a closed serpent spire in the next academic year?
Oh, that's a huge question that I'm absolutely not going to answer. But yeah, that's a big deal. That is definitely a big deal. Look forward to the opening of Arcane Ascension 4.
From Demon, what would be your favorite non-standard build for an attuned, excluding Corin's combat enchanter sword boy thing?
At some point, I would love to see a Pokemon Tamer style character that has a summoner and enchanter hybrid build or something along those lines that figures out a way to connect their contracts to items and thus able to artificially supplement their mana capacity limitations by using items. And then you've got the Pokemon Tamer.
Let's grab someone from the audience.
Hello, it's Neonbur again. What attunement did you most have to alter from the LARPs and stuff to make work in the book setting?
So Arcane Ascension 1 and I think 2 were written before I ran any LARPs on Cowlin. Yeah, I think I wrote both of those first. So I didn't actually have to do a lot of changing from attunements to the version that is in the books because of just the order of operations in which I created these things. There are things in that go the opposite direction now, and a lot of them. So, for example, the mechanics for enchanting are by necessity very different in a live-action role-playing game or a tabletop than in something like the books. The amount of time that it takes to build an enchantment in the books would be prohibitive to make somebody roleplay in a live environment. And the actions that are necessary to take in order to create an enchanted item, trying to replicate that realistically in a live circumstance would be unsafe. Like, I could get somebody to get out a Dremel tool and start carving some runes into something that's made out of metal, but it would be a really bad idea to do that in a LARP environment. So enchanters required a lot of work to adapt in that direction, taking it from the books and into a live action space. Shapers as well. Shapers are hugely different in the live game because some of the basic capabilities of Shapers are things like conjuring floating weapons, and the logistics of doing that in a live game without it requiring a ton of people, it's very, very difficult. So they function very differently in a live space. So I would say that those are the ones that I probably changed the most, going the opposite direction.
I feel like I should have known that, considering I've been in this Discord for as long as I have, but thanks for answering.
I did run other live action games prior to running the Arcane Ascension LARP stuff, but they didn't include attunements. So a lot of this is stuff that I haven't necessarily disclosed because the games that I run are not fully public. So the timeline of when I'm running anything specific, it makes sense that you would be unclear on that.
Well, thanks regardless. Thank you.
I mean, to be fair, Shapers in the LARP could still do the stuff that the Shapers in the book can do. It just required you, recruiting 20 of your friends to show up and play floating hammers.
Yeah, I've seen people doing that for Star Wars LARPs, where they'll get people to play the Force. Hilarious, but very logistically intensive.
All right, from Onyx Oracle, if something were to happen and you were unable to continue writing your several series, would you want another author to complete your vision a la Wheel of Time? And if so, what author would you love to continue your universe, assuming they would accept?
Yes, I would prefer for somebody to continue it. Hopefully that will not be necessary, but yes, if somebody is willing and capable of doing so, it would be my preference for people to continue doing the books. As for who, I don't have a good candidate right now. Unfortunately, most of the people who would be best at it that I'm personally familiar with are already too heavily involved with doing things with their own settings, and I do not feel that it would be right to impose it upon them to try to finish my books. So it would be difficult. I don't have a clear answer for you on who would be best for that right now.
From Cryptid, are co-op temples a thing? I don't remember if we ever got an official answer, but it's something we want to explore in the RP.
Co-op temples? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I think that they're talking about how the shrines are typically a single person goes in and has a test.
Yes. So like elemental temples and stuff, those are cooperative. Yes, those are team-based.
So that's your answer, Cryptid. It's the shrines are solo, the temples are team-based.
There are even some variations on that with the shrines, but yes, most of the shrines, some of the shrines are solo, some of them are team.
From Sterling, is Valian Karis's adopted dad? If not, are Ayara and What's-His-Face his adopted parents?
No and no.
From Sterling, would Melt Lake, with the Hardigan star, be the strongest being in existence?
No, but it would push her up a notch, certainly. And Melt Lake is already fantastically powerful. Melt Lake is probably the strongest ordinary human on Kaldwin.
From Orthus, is Hardigan's star on Kaldwin during the timeline of Arcane Ascension 3?
No comment. And I am going to go ahead and grab somebody from the...
Yep.
Hello. This is John, and I actually had a question on your 2-book series, how your 6 Sacred Swords coincide with the main storyline. One, I think it's a great thing that it goes back and forth, but it like exists in the main storyline. Are you going to continue to do that with more of the books?
Yes, I am hoping to continue to have a frame story that links those. The frame story itself will not be the same because the people are on a train riding somewhere while Karis is telling that story, and eventually that train ride will be over, and the series will not be over at that point. So there will have to be a different frame story for where they are when Karis is telling his story in the future. But yes, there will be some interconnection between the stories.
Okay, cool, because I really enjoy the way you do that it coincides, but then you learn more of the backstory of an info dump, if you will, I guess, on different stuff that happened to him and about the swords.
Definitely. You should expect more of that. I'm glad you like it.
Thank you.
All right. From Sterling, have you had time to catch back up on the latest chapters of Delve?
Oh, I'm still behind on Delve. I'm behind on almost all my web serials right now. The only one that I think I'm really updated on is Threads of Destiny. I follow that one very closely, but I'm behind on Delve. I'm behind on He Who Fights with Monsters. I'm behind on almost all of them, honestly.
From Tavon, would it be possible to transfer a summoner contract to another person like a Wayfarer with the mana types to support it?
Fantastic question. I am not going to answer it, but theory crafting for that type of thing is interesting, and you'll see discussion of that probably around Arcane Ascension 4.
From Amy, who is the Orthos parallel if Dawn equals blue?
Interesting question. I don't have any like mascot pet figures that are analogous to Orthos in the same fashion. Frenemy would be the most obvious, but I don't have a character that is identical. So yeah, I will say that Forge of Destiny has a much more analogous one, which is Zengui, who I'm probably pronouncing wrong. But if you want another flame tortoise serpent character, read Forge of Destiny.
From Demon, how possible is it for someone to overtrain for a judgment and figure out a way to game it to get the attunement they specifically want? Would someone in universe have enough knowledge to think their actions during the judgment will reflect the attunement that they get?
There's plenty of theory crafting on that sort of thing in universe, but they don't have enough accurate information to do it properly. I don't know how much I want to say about this because I don't want to necessarily give away too much of the game about how attunements are assigned, but I will say this much. Somebody could take the same test on different dates, perform identically, and be assigned different attunements. So, as a result of that fact, it is not possible to reliably determine what attunement you are going to get.
From Laura, might we see a Korin versus Korin fight at some point, where one of the Korin fighters is a spirit construct or summon similar to Frenemy?
Yes, it's absolutely possible that you could see that at some point in time.
Let's grab someone from the audience.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So, first of all, thanks for all the work. I really read everything multiple times, and it's all great. So thanks for all that. I have a kind of interesting question, like a bit different than everything else I heard here. So it's regarding maybe your comment on romance in your books, because I feel like in the first book, it was a little bit more prevailing. There was, I would say, more flirting and more of that topic. And then afterwards, there are some definitely some good scenes there, especially in Arcane Ascension 2 and with Dawnbringer. But I don't know, like I kind of feel that maybe you're kind of skipping those things, and I know I would like to know, is it true, or you're just trying to stay in the style of anime and manga and like kind of not really get into those stuff?
Yeah, that's a valid question. So I generally do not enjoy writing too much about romance. That being said, there will be more romance in some of the future books. There will be some of it, I would say, in Arcane Ascension 4, potentially maybe 5. And then there definitely is going to be a romance plot that is running through the Weapons and Wielders series as a whole. It is slow burn romance. I prefer slow romance to characters meeting each other and falling in love immediately. I think that to me, it is more appealing to my own personal tastes. Maybe that's just a reflection of what I enjoy as a reader or what I enjoy personally. But I prefer to have very gradual relationship development. I also like to have some back and forth and uncertainty as opposed to characters just falling in love and then that being that. So I know that there are people who are interested in more romantic content, and I do want to provide that. I would say that it is not my strength as a writer, but I do intend to do more of it at some point in time.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
All right. From Lav, how relevant is the prophecy about Edria's song to Karis or Korin's storyline?
That's a good question. You haven't seen the last of Edria's song, and Edria's song will be relevant at certain points in time. And Edria's song's prophecy may be relevant at certain points, but I don't want to say too much on that subject. There's certainly not before you've read Weapons and Wielders 3. So I'll defer that to some degree, but Edria's song will be relevant for some future books.
From Herald of Chaos, are deeper dominions, if they actually exist, representable by a symbol or rune like dominions and core planes are?
No comment.
All right. From Mixtress, as a non-binary queer, it's refreshing to see representation in a book not specifically marketed for LGBTQ. I know many authors use cis-straight characters exclusively to avoid alienating some readers. What pushed you to include characters with different gender and sexual representations?
Because they exist, and they are important, and the lack of that representation is something that I find is... I think that it diminishes other books when they aren't inclusive. And I think that my books only benefit from having a variety of characters. Variety existing in the real world is a beautiful thing. And I think that it is beautiful that there are people who identify in different ways that have different preferences and that sort of thing. I think that, to me, it makes a more complete story and a more complete universe to have that variety in the story. And beyond that, I think that the lack of that in other works is a representation of problems in our world where people who are different are discriminated against. And I think that it is an important thing to show people who are falling into these other categories that they can be heroes, they can exist, and they can exist in a setting where they're not discriminated against for who they are. And so I like to embrace that and be as inclusive as possible, both because I think those people deserve to be seen, they deserve representation, and because I think the story itself benefits from that representation.
From Magpie, are we likely to get a canon autistic character at any point?
This is a complicated question for me to ask, because I know a lot of people identify Corin as looking autistic in terms of how he reads as a character. And I don't want to say that Corin is or isn't autistic. And the reason why I'm doing that is not any kind of fear on my part that people will hate the book or anything like that if I say things one way or another, but because I'm not a mental health professional and because I don't think that I am properly prepared to say that somebody is autistic or isn't in a fictitious context. The way that I wrote Corin is to give him specific characteristics as a person that I've seen in real world people, and that I think that other people could identify with, or even characteristics that I personally have myself. But they're not things that I see as necessarily being assignable to a specific diagnosis that I don't think that I have the area of expertise necessary to do that. So I hope that I'm not offending anyone through my reticence to call Corin or any other character in my setting autistic. That is the furthest thing from my intention. There are characters in this story that are autistic. I can't tell you which ones they are because I am not autistic and I am not a mental health expert. That's sort of my position on the subject. Autistic people absolutely exist in this setting. Corin may or may not be one of them himself, but I don't feel that I have the expertise necessary to say that one way or another.
From Amazing Guy 11, how can menders reverse heal?
I'm not sure how much I want to get into that, but essentially it has to do with accelerating certain functions in the body offensively instead of for benefit. And so you can cause degradation in the body by doing that. I'm not sure I want to get into anything further than that, but I'll say that much. And I think I'm going to grab somebody. We've got
Yep, go ahead.
Hey, I had a question about an attunement and like dominions.
Go ahead.
All right, so it talked about like the dominion of war in weapon and wielders, or war broken mirrors. I can't remember which one. Is there any attunement with that, or similar to Dominion of War?
Yes, I don't have the list in front of me, but I will say that there is a attunement that corresponds to each of the dominions that you have seen in War of Broken Mirrors.
All right, that's a question. Thanks.
You're welcome.
From Sterling, if Dawn had a mouth, would she like tacos?
Yes, she'd love tacos. Great question.
From Laura, can you describe the spear your character used in the Rindelier Remembered LARP?
Yeah, sure. It is a 6-foot long spear with a wooden shaft and a white crystal spearhead.
From Zig, in a battle of who can cheat the most, who wins? Jonin or Korin?
Depends on the specific contest and what type of cheating we're talking about. So they have completely different styles of cheating abilities. So yeah, it would depend on the specific contest. I would say that in a general sense, Jonin is probably a better quote-unquote cheater than Korin is, and Korin is probably better at broad lateral solutions to problems.
From Sterling, in a fight, would Korin throw Mara at a dragon?
If circumstances required it, absolutely. I'm going to take a couple questions from you, and then I'm going to call it because I have some real-world things that unfortunately I need to take care of. So ask me like 3 more, and then we're gonna call it for the day.
Okay. From Laura, what would happen if someone threw Rin and someone else threw Mara, and they were on a collision course?
I have a feeling that they'd hug it out. I think that there would be some mid-air hugging.
From Lulu, would Reika rather fight 1 dragon-sized duck or 10 horse-sized ducks?
She'd be terrified either way, but the 1 dragon-sized duck.
And for the last question, let's give it to whoever was next on the live question.
Pick 1 or 2, Kester.
What's that?
Pick 1 or 2, so that because there's 2 people and I don't know which one was who first.
It should be whoever's at the top, I think.
All right, I'm picking the top person then.
Hello again. My final question related more around how disabilities, like missing limbs, are handled outside of just healing. For example, someone who was, I understand that someone who was born blind might be able to get a mender to look at them, or someone like, I forgot which deist it was, sorry. Someone like them to look at it, but outside of things like that, like, or situations where magic is keeping it from being healed, what would be like the general way they handled it?
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent question. So things like prosthetics do exist in world, and you will find out that one of the established characters has a prosthetic in one of the future books. So there are things like that, and then there are also just practices that people have for learning how to cope with disabilities, just as there are in the real world. Certain things can be easily addressed by the types of magic and technology they have available. Some things are not. And so you'll see a little bit more about prosthetics in the future, but beyond that, there are ways that people learn to deal with them. And I would say that, that's the answer that I have for you.
Thank you. That will help me in many ways, mainly because that's for an RP character. But thank you for answering all of these questions, not just from me, but from everyone else. I'm sure that we are all very, very thankful for you taking the time out of your day. Have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I would also like to thank everybody who helped set this up. So all my mods, Zig, etc., Lan, and of course I want to thank Kester for being the one asking all this and being our master of ceremonies today.
Anytime.
All right, that's it, everybody. I'm wrapping it up for the day. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you, and I hope that you enjoy the audiobook if you decide to pick it up. Have a great day, everyone.